Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, May the 19th. It is 1 o'clock, sort of on the dot. This is the work session of the Board of County Commissioners. First up, we have Matthew Gillen, the Director of APCHA, for his quarterly update. Welcome.
Commissioners, good afternoon. Matthew Gillen, Executive Director, APCHA.
Doesn't it sound like you're at a rock concert now? There's like audio in the room.
Check, check. One.
You have to be really close to it.
Yeah.
Do we?
Is that better? Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Ted.
Closer.
Yeah. How's this?
So get up a little, really close, like you're a rock star. Come on.
Here we go.
You can do it.
That's a little too close. It's just not as comfortable. So APCHA update. As some of this will be review, but a couple new things. There were 5 amendments to the regulations that we passed at our last APCHA meeting, and we had kind of gone over these. There was a 6th one that was proposed that we didn't put forward, that we'll talk about. But just going through the recent changes, we did approve to change the 3% appreciation cap from a simple 3% that would used to be 3% or CPI, whichever was lower. So this is not retroactive. It's for existing owners who need to sign a new deed restriction. I believe we all approved that. We removed the longest work history requirement from tenant selection.
We did not. We did not, but the board approved it.
The board approved it, yeah.
What do you mean we did not?
The board moved it forward.
I thought you were talking
You
about your.
represented the.
Well, the APCHA board moved it forward.
Yeah.
And that was where the BOCC had stood and supported. Second one was longest work history requirement for tenants of the APCHA managed rental units. It was just kind of an onerous process for staff to try to qualify someone with 30 years of past work history, and then they would end up not even taking the unit. So we basically removed that longest work history and that's only for APCHA managed units. There's only 207 of those. So that is a change. We allow residents now to qualify for a rental unit at an income category above their units category at time of requalification. We had talked about that as something that was keeping people in APCHA units from accepting promotions or accepting bonuses or having any career climbing. So that has been amended as well. We now give applicants with 2 to 4 years of work history some lottery chances, 5 specifically, in the housing lotteries. I think in previous years you had to be working, Matthew, is it correct, 4+ years to qualify?
To get the full priority, yes.
So now we're allowing people with 2 to 4 years, and this is just meant to obviously help new people to town who maybe have exceeded what they initially were offered for workforce housing when they first got here and are finding these next few years the real challenging parts to land housing. It still does honor veterans with more lottery chances, but we are just kind of adjusting the numbers to give chances to these more recent arrivals to town. And then there was a clarification on ADA accessible units that was pretty straightforward. They do have priority. With emergency worker priority applying only to remaining units in APCHA managed rentals. And then we kind of clarified what emergency workers were. I believe it was hospital personnel, fire, police, ambulance, people with 30-minute emergency response times. they're still considered, they're emergency workers. So that was, those are the 5 that went through. We had a long, Matthew?
And I just wanted to also pat APCHA on the back that we tried really hard to get those regulation changes as they were being discussed out in the community, and really tried. We mentioned them in the newspaper. We had them on social media. We've unfairly, in my opinion, but we have been criticized over the years for not publicizing potential regulations as they're coming through. The board meetings are always on TV. We have the packet so people could get access to that information. But with this current round of regulation changes, we really went out of our way to make sure that they were well publicized throughout the community. And I think that was reflected in the way the process worked as well.
And there was an op-ed on that a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So the one that we did not move forward was the policy for sex offenders, which we discussed. In the discussion with Tom Smith, it was revealed there was unknown challenges, if not legal challenges, about how to apply this rule. The original idea, as you know, was to have rental and ownership units be reviewed through Verified First for sex offender history at their cost. It turns out we weren't sure how it would work for requalifying, for signing a new deed restriction. The retroactive policy seemed to have a lot of issues to it that Tom said he needed more time to consider. I know we had other issues with the policy as well, but basically for now, Tom's going to review and see if and what is practical. We're going to revisit that, I believe, is on the August agenda. We need to hear more. He had serious legal concerns, particularly about, I think it's vested rights that retroactive people living in housing wouldn't have to conform to. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. That didn't move forward. I don't know, Matthew, if you have more to add.
I do not have updates. We've discussed it we had internal discussion with Tom. Like Ted said, he's looking at a lot of different things, and he'll bring that to the board in August.
Yeah. So those are what's happened in the past. Coming up tomorrow at the board meeting is a request regarding required work hours for next year when the airport's closed. So, as of now, all APCHA occupants are required to work 1,500 hours a year. And with the airport closed and we're looking at a slower summer, I believe is this being put forth by the chamber first?
Tomorrow it's the chamber giving their presentation on the possible impacts, and then leading from that, we will then ask the board if the board would like us to consider a formal, an informal, or no change. Based on that information, what would the board like to instruct staff to explore in the next few months?
So it's a concern, and there have been public comment on it. I think you could see it affecting some people drastically, and others are not the policy, but you can see the airport closure affecting worker hours for a lot of people in different ways. And I don't know if we're going to be considering the different options. One is to just remove the requirement for the year, and that is something that we'll probably be asked where we stand on that. There are other ways of probably looking at it. I don't know if it would be something where you would apply for a waiver on this. How do we want to do this? But the fact is, with the airport closed, certain people might struggle to meet their hours. And so we're going to hear more about that. We aren't going to have to make a decision on it, except, like Matthew said, to maybe advise staff to come back with more info. I don't know if we want to discuss that, or that update's enough.
It's great you're considering that.
Yeah. Greg?
I was thinking, I'm glad you're considering it. It sounds like a lot of thought has gone into it. I'd be concerned about just saying we're not going to do it at all this next year. I'd rather see a process of some sort so that we can really identify the people that really need the help versus the ones who might not. I still think that just the optics on it are that that we want to be paying attention. And so would that require an ombudsman or something like that? Somebody they could reach out to say, hey, my job's gone for the next 2 months. Can you help me on this? It just seems like there ought to be some communication there. But my biggest concern is how many people would be asking that, and is it overwhelming for you?
Yeah, I think that was one of the concerns is, for staff, if there is a process that we have to go through, that is extra work. And then it puts APCHA in the situation of telling some people yes, some people no. So, we can, as the board instructs us to look at this, we can look at the pros and cons, but I'm always wary of putting APCHA in the position of having to evaluate people on something else and make a decision. So my personal preference would be a blanket decision. Also because it's unclear now what the downstream effects of the airport closure will be. Definitely people who work at the airport, but then how far down the economy is that going to impact? And that's much harder to gauge. So if a donut delivery service, if their sales are down next year, could they argue that's because of the airport? I mean, they could, but then there's lots to consider, but we definitely wanted to start talking about it now, not in January when people start noticing and getting upset then and worried. So we really wanted to have the board get some information from ACRA and then give us some information on how they'd like us to explore it.
Great, thank you. That sounds reasonable, but I got stuck on the donut delivery service. I didn't know it existed.
I just made that up. I had to come up with something, and that's in my panic. That's all I came up with.
Is the amplification working? Because I'm not really hearing Matthew. So,
okay.
Is it on?
It is.
Can you put Can you put your mouth right up to it and see if it amplifies?
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right up to it then. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can hear him. Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah, well, you're not 79.
I think there'd probably be a lot of options to consider with that one, because going from 1,500 to no hours required is probably, I don't know, personally, I think a reduction in hours. I don't think we want to just tell everyone, okay, you don't have to work this year. It might lead to other unintended consequences, but I don't know. We'll see what we come up with that. So then the next one was something I'm learning was a Kelly initiative, All Valley Worker Policy. And I don't know, have we talked about it up here before, or is this the first time?
It was brought up by Kelly when we were coming up with the work plan for this year, and she wanted us to examine whether certain institutions throughout the valley, I think we encountered this most recently with RAFTA when we were doing the Burlingame 3 build out, that some RAFTA employees who were based in the urban growth boundary, in the growth zone, were able to get access to Burlingame 3, and then other RAFTA employees who were based further down valley were not. So it's an exploration as to whether or not the APCHA board would like us to explore extending certain APCHA privileges to other institutions or other people who work throughout the valley. And it's very much a discussion tomorrow on, is this something you want us to look at? And Kelly wanted us to, which is why we got it on the agenda, and so we're bringing it up tomorrow for discussion. There's absolutely no policy developed yet. This is an initial discussion by the APCHA board. How far do they want us to look at this?
Greg.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to speak on behalf of RAFT, although I haven't cleared it with the board. I have one board member here. RAFTA being an organization comprised of municipalities and counties up and down the valley, it might make a lot of sense to allow them access to APCHA housing, wherever in Burlingame or wherever, because in general they serve the entire valley. If a RAFTA employee is living up here but only working between Glenwood and Carbondale, doesn't make a lot of sense. Right. But I think that would sort itself out. It would be great to be able to open it up. There aren't many organizations that RAFTA is unique in that it was an authority created with all these municipalities and counties So I don't think it would be, it wouldn't be a huge change to make. And I'm not sure we'd have to do it across the entire watershed. Some organizations perhaps would have a footprint that includes the entire valley like RAFTA's, but I don't know. I just want to have them discuss that, and I'd be happy to ask a RAFTA employee or RAFTA executive to be there, representative to be there, if you thought it would be helpful to talk about why is RAFTA special. You know, Paul Tadoon, who's one of the founders, who's still there as our attorney, just talks about how unique that relationship is, and that it's a conglomeration of all these entities, public entities. So just want to highlight that maybe RAFTA is special, but there could be others as well.
Francie?
I would say CDOT might be another one.
Good call.
But I agree, there probably aren't many. So basically, the idea is that if you work for an employer that's not based in Pickens County, but you work throughout the valley or whatever, would you be eligible for APCHA?
That's basically the question, yes. I mean, you know,
And
we
that
like-
was,
we
that
like-
was,
sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You carry on. Well, we want to be nice to people, but that's also, expanding demand on the program, which is the downside.
So then let's add Black Hills Energy,
Right.
let's add Holy Cross Energy,
It's a
let's
big
add
question.
Comcast,
Right.
let's add CenturyLink, let's add Starlink. Sorry, that was not supposed to be
You've gone
funny,
into
but I
the-
think
It
We've
was.
gone into the NGO world.
So
So it's a-
where does the city stand on this?
I do not believe they have discussed it. I'm not aware of John and Christine having specifically discussed it with City Council. And like I said, tomorrow is the first time we're bringing it up as is this something you want to explore? So we're a long way from any kind of policy. Tomorrow is the initial discussion.
Well, when you bring it up, you might talk about the fact that we have supported now 3 mobile home parks for employees who might not work in Pickens County at all. I mean, some of them do, obviously. I don't know. That's a tough one, especially when you mention all those companies.
Well, yes, they're companies. though.
Kara.
Well, and I would just add on, I think maybe where Ted and Matthew started is that this did initially come to the board as a preliminary discussion to explore, because it was not only RAFTA, I think it was the Basalt Sanitation District. And
Right.
so it was who is serving some area of Pickens County that because they're regional, they have been precluded from participating in APCHA. So I think that there's some opportunities as the APCHA board talks about it, of what those are, but this was a concern that was brought up by the county commissioners, understanding how we look at those critical services and eligibility within APCHA.
So VIP trash, waste management, Cisco.
Some other jurisdictions do it by a certain percentage of work done in Pickens County, in their county. I'm not saying Pickens County, but I believe looking at some of the other counties or ski town employee housing programs, if say you had 75% of your work in the county, then you would qualify. But there also wasn't a ton. One of the things in the packet was the past 3 years of 166 denied applications, 17 were denied at least in part to the majority of their income being earned outside of the county. And so, like, it's not an enormous problem. I think we're addressing.
Sadie.
Snowmass used to have a requirement to qualify for Snowmass housing. You had to work a certain percent of so a contractor who did a certain percent of his jobs in Snowmass could qualify for Snowmass housing.
Okay.
But I don't know what, I don't.
Yeah,
there might be
in the
some-
packet, it says Snowmass, to be eligible for housing, you must work in Snowmass Village, but once you own, you can work anywhere in Pickens County.
That sounds right.
That's what it is right now. So, yep. So initially in Snowmass, but then after a year, anywhere in Pickens County.
So it's not just limited
No, no,
after a certain time
that's-
frame to Snowmass.
That's not what we have.
Yeah, it might be that's a kind of a template to look at and see how it's worked in Snowmass.
Greg?
I think Ted makes a point that presently, it's not that many people. That could change, I guess. RAFTA is in a unique position in that RAFTA simply cannot invest in an affordable housing project unless they own it fee simple. And even then, we had a lot of issues with the state and had to go to the legislature and have the rules changed in order to be able to work with our housing program down there. So this is something that RAFTA can't solve, although they do have drivers that need housing that are serving this end of the community that might not qualify. So they, and clearly people point out others might have a use for this. It doesn't sound like a huge number of people presently, but maybe we could give it a pilot program or try it with, say, we'll allow 20 to apply in the first year or something. I don't know.
Francie?
I would be sort of behind RAFTA being an exception, that you make it a possibility for RAFTA. I'm thinking of things like Koru, for instance, construction, where those guys work up here all day, every day, but the office is in Carbondale. So they have to commute, that's just one of many like that. So cleaning services, it could get pretty tricky. And maybe they should be living up here at APCHA housing if they're working up here, I don't know. But I would at least push for RAFTA when you bring it up again at the table. And then I don't know about all the others. Could be a lot.
I mean, CDOT's working out of Public Works. Right? CDOT's got offices in our
CDOT
building.
what?
CDOT works out of Public Works. So
Yeah,
the
some of
folks
them.
managing Highway 82, CDOT, are working out of Public Works. Taking
But
care of
I
Public
do remember they're saying about we couldn't get any CDOT drivers because they had nowhere to live.
Works. But my point is, like, it's very easy to say RAFTA only. And
I
then
understand.
Very quickly,
Yeah, I
behind
understand.
it, you say, well, CDOT's a critical service. That's life safety.
Yeah,
That's the quality of our roads.
Yep.
So
I don't know.
you've got the drivers, and now we don't have the clear roads. It seems like, wait, where are our priorities?
It would be great if the other counties had Eagle does, but if Garfield had this kind of service. Just saying.
I think you also want to look at, sometimes it comes into how can staff manage this, because deed restrictions are pretty complicated, and there's
Yeah.
lots of different kinds now. And this could be challenging, not that that's a reason not to do it, but it could be a challenging thing just to go through the qualifying process and try to determine, are we talking, and documenting things through your W-2s and stuff. It could be really hard. And I know sometimes that factors into some of these decisions with APCHA, because already in this conversation today, it's come up twice, I think, So is it possible? And that's something I think we'd have to hear from staff, like what would this even look like? And can it be done? Especially if we're coming up with all these different business entities that
Yeah.
could technically qualify under a
Right.
blanket change of the rule. So, can keep you updated. I don't
Yeah,
know,
good
Matthew, is
luck
there
with
more
that.
on that one?
I mean, that's it for right now. We'll have an initial discussion tomorrow and see what the board thinks. Yeah.
Is this a case where, similar to your first responder, emergency responder, you'd come up with potentially a list, and it's a fixed list?
I mean, that would be one path. Yeah.
Because I could see you defining critical
Yeah.
services
Yeah. That's,
and saying, it makes. I mean, to Kelly's point, right? We're opening up valley-wide, but there are critical services that are, and it's Holy Cross, and it's RAFTA, and it's CDOT. And then it's that second layer, it's harder to justify, if you will. So nothing against construction companies.
I have lots.
but I'm. It sounds like what Kara said. I'm glad we're talking about it. This is definitely a reflection of what the county commissioners wanted us to talk about it. So it got on the work plan, and we're talking about it. So great.
Anything else in the quarterly update?
I think that was all I saw on the update.
I'd like to know how the turnover with Cindy is going.
It's going well, actually. So for those of you who don't know, Cindy is retiring, who's been with us. She's City of Aspen employee number 11. Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud, but she's been there for a long time. So we've taken Cindy out of direct management like last month. So I'm directly supervising the property management and maintenance, at least for the next 6 months, maybe up to a year. We are hiring a sales and qualifications specialist, which is a new position. We have some interviews today and tomorrow. And then we've reassigned the rest of Cindy's responsibilities throughout the organization. So Bethany will be the only deputy starting in March.
What will she be doing?
Bethany will be the only deputy starting in March. So she has more responsibility, and we've spread out Cindy's role. And we're right now meeting weekly with Cindy to try and capture everything she does, and make sure we're tracking everything down and trying to capture as much of her institutional knowledge as we can.
Yeah, great, thank you.
And her replacement?
So Cindy's not getting replaced.
No, so you're just shifting.
Right.
I was just gonna say, somebody needs to be walking to work every day like Sydney has for the last bazillion years. I always see her walking to
She's
and
out
from work.
there. So
She's
Cindy
great about
herself is literally irreplaceable and
That's true.
is not being replaced.
And she knows all the walkable routes to
Yeah.
all the different offices you've had.
Further questions for Matthew or Ted? Thank you for the
Great.
quick update.
Thank you very much.
So, and can we eliminate the people that are enjoying changing their names? Please.
What?
Thank you.
What'd you ask?
We're getting
Thank you.
some-
Is it okay to move forward earlier on our, and I'm seeing Kim, that usually means we need a 4-minute grassroots break.
Well, we don't need a break, but these new microphones were kind of all over the place. They seem to work best. Francie, you're doing great at like this far away from the microphone. Otherwise, if you're like this far away, it's super quiet today. Yeah, you're looking at
I'm
me.
not putting this thing up
They
to
made
my
some
mouth and getting all
She
the
said it
time.
doesn't have to be up to your mouth. See where I am? She said it works really well at that distance.
About this far away.
Can we promote Ashley Perl, please?
Can you try using your microphone?
We told them it would likely be early and to be here at 1:30, and we anticipate how early. Since you're starting, we can start, but, I also need to share the slides and so.
Give us a minute.
Want me to get started?
I think so.
Okay.
Did you text her yet?
I did not. So we do have Jordana and Kelly Medina will also be joining us, but we can get started. So we're here to follow up with the board and discuss on the Healthy Community Fund renewal for the 2026 ballot. So following up, we had a high-level conversation with the board at the retreat back in March, and just wanted, and at that time, there was some direction from the board to come back with more information as it really related to how you all evaluate what would be key questions for a renewal question for the fund. So Really, we're going to walk through with staff and talk through kind of in 3 different iterations, some further analysis and information related to a sunset timeline. So historically, we've gone from 5, 7, 9 years in different timelines for the fund. And so we're going to walk through some different options on a longer sunset or no sunset option for you all to consider, as well as following up on the type of property tax that you all could look at considering. So currently it's a fixed revenue. We'd shared preliminarily it's the only kind that we have. The other types are fixed mill, and so Liz has done some great work that kind of forecasts out what those differences would look like as you consider the future of the fund, and then what kind of amount you might want to be considering, whether it stays flat or if you would want to be looking at an increase. So to jump in, we've got a little bit of background both for the public or for the board, but as well as for the public. And so just again, what is the Healthy Community Fund? It's a voter-approved property tax with the mission to help Pitkin County residents and employees be independent, healthy, and safe. This was started in 2001 and has really become the backbone and part of the key infrastructure as Pitkin County looks at the delivery of health and human services into the community and really building up that self-sufficiency across the region. And so moving on to the next slides, a brief history. So as I said, the first one was passed in 2001, began in 2002. That had a 4-year sunset and was really limited to senior services, and then what I will term for here is really human service partner agencies. So it is other than senior services, it has never funded Pitkin County human services directly. It's always been through the nonprofit partners that we rely on so heavily, both for some of our mandated services and a lot of that preventative and self-sufficiency work. So at that time, it funded 9 organizations. And then in 2006, we did a renewal, and that sunset in 2012. And then we started to see the breadth of who was funded expand to 29 organizations. And I'll get into a higher level about that breakdown on the next slide. And that's when you started to see some of the expansion into how we define healthy community. And so we started to see it into public access television, Nordic Trails, so started to get into a wider breadth of that, the nonprofits that are funded through the Healthy Community Fund. I should pause and say it set up a Citizens Grant Review Committee was set up in the initial ballot language in 2002. So that has been something enacted since the beginning, and that group reviews the grant process for the fund. So in 2011, we also renewed again for a 6-year period, and this is where we started to see a big expansion of the number of nonprofits and how it was expanded to 61 different organizations. And then in 2018 is when we saw an increase, the most recent increase to the fund, extended it for 10 years. And that's when we started to bring in, perfect timing for Jordana to walk into the room. It's like the way the Healthy Community Fund. But that is when we increased it to also support public health based on, obviously, the county creating a public health department. It has always supported why am I forgetting the name? Community Health Services, but obviously the expansion of public health, and when we stood up the public health department, we included that in the Healthy Community Fund. So as of today, it funds 46% for human service partner organizations, 12% to community nonprofits, 22% to public health, and then 15% for senior services. You can go to the next slide. So I know this is really rough, but we just wanted to put it up here again, kind of reiterating the funding allocation. The ballot language has actually stayed fairly stagnant. I shouldn't say stagnant. That's not the right word. Fairly stable over the terms. And as you all have looked at that renewal and kept it for a broad range of services, as you look at what does it mean to provide stable funding for health, human services, and all of those that make up what is the definition of healthy community for our community. So next slide. Oh, sorry, that's my working one. All right. So here's where you can see the differences. In how the funding was allocated over, again, this is just in those first years of the ballot renewal. So you can see senior services is kind of the baseline that's in there, and then that health and human service, kind of those key partner agencies. And then we always had a small pool for the community nonprofits. That's where you started to see from the 9 initially, it started to grow a little bit, and you can see some growth in the funding availability, while minimal has grown a little bit over time. And then community health services we pulled out just so you could see kind of where the public health piece was over time compared to then in 2019 when we added public health, and you see the community health services is still in there just at a smaller level. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jordana.
Thank you. Jordana Sabella, Pitkin County Public Health Director. And I get to talk a little bit about the fund over time and then what we've been seeing in terms of need. So this graph just shows us that when the Healthy Community Fund was first passed, it only funded 9 community nonprofits. Over the next 20 years, we saw that increase to over 70 nonprofits who are funded currently by the Healthy Community Fund, which is a great change in scope as the dollars increased and the scope increased. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the community needs and funding pressures that we're seeing are increasing for what the Healthy Community Fund can address. So the COVID-19 pandemic intensified existing social services and health challenges, and ongoing inflation, rising housing costs, and current reductions or instability in federal and state funding are all pieces that are continuing to strain households and service providers. As a result, we see the demand for core public health and human services programs may increase 10 to 40%. And we're already seeing off-cycle funding requests that are emerging due to the loss of federal resources. So those funding challenges or requests have totaled $150,000 in 2025 up to this point. Currently, the fund is co-administered by Human Services and Public Health. We administer several contracts in public health for critical services such as detox, integrated healthcare, and mental health. There's substantial oversight that goes into that data collection and monitoring. Human Services oversees the broad grant making for community programs and nonprofits at this time. And then both the Healthy Community Fund and the General Fund currently backfill core human and public health services. So the Healthy Community Fund is still, in and of itself, not enough to cover the costs of those departments, to the tune of about $2.1 million for human services and $1 million for public health in 2025.
And Kelly and Kel, do you want to join us? There's 2 seats. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me.
Hang on,
I'm Ashley Perl, Housing and Resiliency Director for Pitkin County. That was background, hopefully not too new for the board, but we want to make sure that we're sharing all this with the public. So the main purpose of today's discussion is to hopefully get some direction from the board. So to let you know a little bit about the timeline. If you want to place a renewal question on the 2026 November ballot, that has to be submitted to the clerk early September. That needs to be submitted via a 2-read resolution by the board. So right now, staff is planning to come in front of you in August for a first and a second read, which means that, if we can fit 2 meetings in August, that'd be great, but we're gonna try and get that first meeting in the end of July so that we have a little bit of wiggle room for you all. So we're gonna be back here June 23rd for a work session. And what we'd like to do in June 23rd is have draft ballot language for you to look at. The county attorney's office has hired outside legal counsel to draft the ballot language. And so what we're hoping to do is get some direction from you all today that we can then share with the outside legal counsel so that they can start to put together some language that you all can see. That isn't an ideal scenario, but I just wanted to let you know that's why we're really focusing today's conversation on these 3 questions, which is sunset or no sunset, the revenue structure, which is fixed mill versus fixed valuation, and the scale of the investment, which is kind of keep the amount of revenue the same or increase it. In June, we would hope to share some draft ballot language with you and then bring kind of these next deeper dive questions to you about do we keep the allocations the same or the division of who gets what? How do we kind of dole out that, and some other questions that, are kind of how we function. These are the 3 that really are big and will dictate some of those other more detailed conversations. So that's why we wanted to start high level today. So we're just going to walk through each one of these and then hopefully at the end have some direction.
Yeah, we have to notify the clerk's office of intent, I believe in June.
Yeah.
Okay, don't forget that date.
Yes, Jeanette's keeping us honest.
And the other thing is, when is the question ripe enough that we have to have staff step out of conversation during working hours?
So up until you all workshop and give direction to staff to prepare, we can be involved. Once you finalize your resolution to put it on the ballot, then staff can no longer
Let's
operate
verify that, because there might be a gray area in there.
We can verify that,
Okay,
but I
yeah, I
feel
think
comfortable
that's
of,
great.
we can bring forward on behalf of the board. So we are really operating at your direction, what you're hoping. We can operate on behalf of the board up until you finalize that resolution, and we will triple check that for you all.
Okay, yeah, let's make sure. And the last thing I have for right now anyway is, I think one of the other things we need to do is revisit our priorities. Because of what you just showed us about the increase in needs, what we're uncertain of coming further, cuts down from federal and state level, we might need to rethink the priorities. In the ballot language, looking back on the ballot language that I signed the resolution for, I think that should be part of our discussion. Maybe not today, but at some point.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We were hoping to have those kinds of conversations in June once we have a little bit more of an idea of the shape of what it's taking, hopefully from today.
And maybe to jump in and tag team on what Ashley's saying, I think as you all consider and what we put on for the ballot, where we're operating, and some of it is keeping the ballot language pretty broad because that leaves the most flexibility. And then what Ashley's alluding to is how we look at that resolution that complements it, starts to give that shape to it. So we'll have some more crack specifically through the resolution and some options there. I think it's really we want to make sure that ballot language provides some of the flexibility.
And that's what we did the last time.
Yep.
It was very clear.
Greg?
Thoughts on this are, one, we've done it before. It's been renewed at least twice. It's been very successful. People want it in the community. We know that. It provides economic stability, especially in times like COVID when we have a pandemic or during a recession, or, it provides another element of economic stability. The more people it affects, the better, really. So when I looked at, we see the chart with the number of nonprofits being included. I'd also love to see the number of people being touched at the same time, because there's an argument to say, well, let's roll it back, and I've contemplated that. I've also thought, well, maybe expanding it would make more sense to more organizations. That's a conversation we can have. It is going to provide backfill for what's happening with the Fed and at the state level. The community already expects this, but they're not going to get it unless we provide it, perhaps, is an argument. And then I think the more recipients that are worthwhile and vetted and qualified and involved, the better, only because it makes the fund that much more attractive to voters. I'll put it out there. So I'm thinking that it's done incredibly well, and we should be confident as we shape this next initiative. Thank you.
Great. Shall we jump in to specific questions about Sunset? That's our first one.
I could pick it up there and say what I think,
I
but
mean,
if you want,
you teed us
you're
up
ready,
really well, Greg. Thank you.
go ahead.
So the first question we love to pose to you is the sunset, and we discussed this a bit in the retreat. So there's, when Kara showed the history of the tax, the longest sunset period we've ever had was, I believe, 7 years. A lot of them were 4-year terms. Well, at the beginning of the fund, we weren't sure, and we weren't sure what the needs were, and it needed to go back to the voters fairly frequently. I think at this point, how many years later, 24 years later, we know that the community needs this. We know that the community expects this, and we know that the needs are growing. And like Jordana said, right now, I think all of our minds are on the federal and state cuts. But well before those started showing up in this administration, we saw coming out of COVID with inflation, we saw entirely new needs. Food security, which was not really a place where the county played that actively before, became a very emergent need. We saw more needs for behavioral health and access to physical health. This kind of term self-sufficiency showed up again and again in these post-COVID surveys of how are people doing, what's your biggest needs. Of course, we saw need for housing and need for childcare as the top two that came out of some of those surveys, but quickly to follow was food, mental health access, physical health access, general self-sufficiency, and then also a need for more regional collaboration across that. People saying, when I'm crossing jurisdictional boundaries or when I'm going from one provider to the another, I'm working with an entirely different set of parameters. I don't know if I qualified. Nobody's talking to each other. So what a longer sunset or a no sunset option would give us is the ability to give confidence to our community providers and to our community members that this is here to support them in the long run, which I think, Greg, you kind of just said it, of this isn't going away, the needs aren't going away. It's become an expected safety net in this community. So we've put up there, you could consider a sunset provision, which the advantages would be that we still go back to the voters periodically. It would maybe be easier to gain voter approval. That's kind of up to you all. That's a political question. And it does allow a future adjustment of funding levels or program scope if we feel like we need them. The kind of considerations or cons to having a sunset is it does create some question about the long-term funding availability. Will this always be here? How much can I build out my organization and rely on this? It also requires us to go back to ballot at some point, which coming up in the next 20-ish years, we do still have some other programs. There they are. Here's all the different property taxes across the county. Thank you, Liz. You can see not a ton have sunsets, but Housing and Open Space and Trails Fund. Housing is due for renewal or would sunset in 2050, and Open Space and Trails
in 2039.
So that's one other consideration we wanted to bring up of just if we are setting a sunset, being wary of, in a 3 or 5 year time period, are we going back to the ballot to renew one of these 3 taxes or all 3 of these at the same time? And then of course there's the election and campaign costs and staff costs to kind of do all of this that we're doing right now. The no sunset, you can see it up there, provides stable and predictable funding, kind of decreases the burden of needing to go back to the ballot, but it may be, it doesn't have built-in opportunities for voter approval or voter review, and up to you all, but it may be harder for the electorate to support. but you all know them better. So I'll flash this again just so you can kind of have a sense of where everybody else is setting and the timelines there. We have other stuff, but this is the last on Sunset. So if you have questions on Sunset, happy to answer them.
Just a somewhat rhetorical question. Given sort of the unbalance at the administrative level, both at the state and the federal level, sort of shifting landscape, it seems like the 1 year you'd potentially go to the voters and say no sunset would be this year. If you look the past 4 renewals, this would beg the question of, like, these are needs, not wants. And it makes the most sense to say no sunset, similar to other property taxes we have in existence. So again, somewhat rhetorical, but again, sort of given the uncertainty at both the state and the federal level with both administrations, and pushing human services into 28 in terms of cohorts and sort of other machinations, the uncertainty couldn't be greater right now, and the need couldn't be greater right now to actually just solidify this and say, much like the ambulance district or something else, these are needs at the community, and these are core to the services we provide as Pitkin County. So, Craig?
To respond to that, I appreciate that, and that's something I'm thinking about as well. But I know it's less popular than having a sunset, so the voters do have a chance for a say. Would we consider 20-year sunset, which would be 2046? Is that would that also serve the same purpose that you're talking about, but still offer a sunset so the voters know that it will be coming back? I think that provides a measure of confidence and accountability. It's a long time frame, but maybe it makes a difference.
Patty?
Yeah, do Kara want to jump in? Do you mind?
I was just going to say, I think based on, we heard some of the same discussion from the retreat, and I think we looked, and Liz can speak more, I think no matter what, a longer sunset gives a lot more certainty to the program, and I think we looked at a 20-year, how that does sit with those 2 others that are sunsetting. I think you probably have some flexibility between a 20 or 30-year. 20 does not conflict with other sunsets, but I would caution it stacks those that are sunsetting within the same time frame. So if you consider something longer, do you go, and I'm looking at Liz, she might know the numbers, 25, 30 or something, just so that you all aren't stacked with 4 renewals within a 5-year time period as for all these critical programs.
Patty?
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe you can bring back to us, if we extended for 30 years, how would that hit the other ones that have to come back? We need to see that.
Well, the thing that we have to be careful of is that we know what the current sunsets are, but we don't know what those futures, if those taxes are going to go back onto a ballot, and if what new sunset, because those timeframes have always been different. So we can only really speak to the open space and trails and housing sunsets that are currently in place, which is that 2039 and the 2050 date. So, and the other caveat to put in here is that the current tax does not actually expire until the end of 2027. And so when we're thinking of dates, we're doing it from 2028. So I just want to make sure that that's clear as well. It's not 2026.
So it'd be 20-year would be 2048.
Yeah, well, I think we should look at a sunset, what time frame, 20 years or 30 years, depends on our further discussion. I think I think right now people around the country don't trust the government, and I think that would give some vote of confidence if people knew that it was going to come back to them at a certain time frame, rather than just, you guys are taking our money from here on out. What if you don't need it? Are you going to give it back? Even though we could, we can do a temporary mill levy if we went with a fixed mill or whatever mill. So I think I would be leaning more towards some kind of sunset, even though I know it's nice not to go back to the voters and have to do a campaign. I think the key for me right now is getting it passed.
Francie?
Well, I think a sunset might be in order so that we can re-look at the structure in case our county changes significantly in 10 or 20 years. I don't know if it will, but I did read in your packet that it does provide you the opportunity to reassess is this what we really want, the way we have it structured now? Like, if we picked a fixed mill without an increase now, would we want to reconsider that in the future? And if we had a sunset that was, or no sunset rather, we wouldn't have that opportunity to reconsider it. So I don't know how long though. I mean, I think the voters would vote for this even with no sunset. So I would say we need a sunset for other reasons than the voters, but I don't know how long.
I tend to agree. Sunsets are good. People feel better about voting for things with sunsets because they're not permanent. But it also, I think my decision can also be swayed by other decisions we make further in the conversation. Because if we change too much, then that makes it harder to justify saying eliminating a sunset. So I really think, while I agree, I think it depends on where we land with, are we switching to a mill levy and are we increasing it? And that would also maybe change the calculus on the sunset terms, just saying, but I kind of agree with the direction we're going.
Cool. You guys
Shall we
ready
go
to
there?
yeah, circle the 20-year for giggles, and we'll move on?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're giggling. Liz?
All right, so we are on to the next piece that we would like to discuss. There are two different options that we are putting in front of you today. One is a fixed mill and one is a fixed amount or fixed value or fixed revenue. You'll hear a whole bunch of different wording there, but they all mean the same thing. So for a fixed mill, as you saw in that previous chart that we were showing with the sunsets, that is what we have for every one of our property taxes except for the Healthy Community Fund. The Healthy Community Fund is our only fixed revenue mill at this point. So there are pros and cons to both of these. We provided some additional information in the AIS about those and showing kind of how they chart differently, how they grow over time based on what our historical trends have been here in Picken County. We have been somewhat conservative in those trends that we provided because we did have the very big boost a couple years ago. We actually took that year out of our average so that it's not actually considered in our average since 2000 is how far back I went. And so I've been looking at our increases since 2000 based on taking that one kind of exceptional year out of that an analysis. So I just want to put that out there because that year does kind of throw things a little bit more out of whack, I would say. So did you have a...
Well, I want to get to it.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So with the nice thing about, I'll start with the fixed revenue, even though it's at the bottom here. The nice thing about a fixed revenue is that it's very predictable year over year. If you look at the growth of the Healthy Community Fund, except for the times when it's been renewed at an increase, it is very stable. It goes up in a very predictable amount because CPI does tend to be fairly stable as well. And so it goes up by a combination of CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, so basically inflation, and by growth. Growth in Picken County is fairly stable and tends to be right about 1%. So that trend line over time tends to be very stable. It does not go down when property values decrease. It has no large swings up or down. So again, it's that stable kind of known entity. The thing that it doesn't do, though, is it doesn't increase with property valuations. And so when we tend to have these big jumps in property valuations, tends to be when actually this fund is even more important because people are losing housing or costs are going up or other programs are having issues. So it tends to be actually times when those property valuations are on those big increases is actually when this fund is even more important to the community. And so what can happen, like what happened back in a few years ago, is that the Healthy Community Fund kind of stayed at a very stable rate, but we saw a huge increase in demand in the community for these monies. So Flipping over to the fixed mill levy, growth is tied to assessed values. So that means that you can potentially have big ups and big downs. Here in Pickens County, so far, at least again going back to 2000, we have not seen huge downturns. We've seen some small downturns. We had the recession in 2010, which definitely had a downturn. Again, that was a time when the community does need this fund, so it is, I don't want to downplay that. When we do have large downturns in the economy, that is another time when this fund is very important. And so when the cycle goes down like that, it's still tied to those property values, and so we could see a decrease in that year or years when we have that happen.
Question.
Greg?
Okay, now I can jump in.
Okay.
I know the last time we had the huge valuation increase, we talked and actually issued credits. Could we include a credit component to this? So if there's a huge increase in valuation, is it possible that we could help defray some of that for people with credits?
Yes.
And can that be discussed and even baked into this? Maybe not baked in, but discussed at the same time as a possible, so that, we see some egregious increase in valuation, that we actually have action we can take, and we're not just going to be collecting all that money.
Yes. So technically, you can actually do a mill levy credit with both of these. So we could do a mill levy credit with the fixed revenue too, if it was needed for the community or for whatever reason. So the temporary mill levy credits are available in both of these options, so that does not go away. I would say that it's unlikely you would need to do that with the fixed revenue because it's a very small increase each year, but it is possible in both scenarios. With the fixed mill levy, we can issue as much of a temporary credit as this board decides, and that gets decided every single year, and that can be done even when we don't have huge swings, but we just we don't need this much money in the Healthy Community Fund this year. We don't want to collect this much revenue, so we can do that any year through the budget process and through the setting of the mills.
So we could create this, and the board at the time would still have the flexibility to issue credits, or so that gives me a lot of confidence that it's not a runaway train in terms of tax increase or revenue increase. A board that's paying attention can issue credits if necessary.
Yes.
Thanks.
And I just want to put a finer point, I think, on your question, Greg, which is, do you need to bake it in now? And to Liz's point, you don't need to bake it in. You can make that, and in fact, I would encourage, do not bake it in and leave that as an annual discussion for any future boards too.
That being said, we need to
Abby,
make it
and
clear
then-
to the public.
Yes.
Even though it's not in the language, the public needs to know that, because they didn't understand it when we did the reduction with open space and trails recently, right?
Yep, we did it for open space and trails. We've done it on the ambulance district
This
several
district.
years. We've done it on a few other funds
And the
as
public
well.
needs to know that we
Yep.
don't
We've
just
done it.
talk about doing it, we've done it, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Liz?
I was just going to finish my fixed mill piece. So the good thing about a fixed mill is that, again, it grows with the property values as we discussed, and so based on historical property values here in Pickens County, that means that this will grow at a slightly higher rate with the fixed mill than it will at the fixed revenue. So over time, assuming that we look back at kind of historical period and what has happened here in the past, that is kind of where things line up, and so that's where we can show those graphs that which we aren't going to get to quite yet, but they were in the AIS of kind of like how you can see that trend over the 10-year period.
I think that it's important to talk about fixed mill or fixed amount with the next conversation, which is how much increase in revenue or stay the same. So I think we should go through all these and show the pretty graphs, and then you all can kind of debate them together, because they're related, as you probably saw. So the third question we have for you all today is keep the revenues the same, which even if you move to a mill levy, we've calculated what we collect right now in a fixed valuation, and we can calculate that into a mill levy. So although it would be a different question on the ballot. You could keep the amount the same, but you cannot say to the voters, we're not increasing taxes. You would have to say, it would look kind of like a new question on the ballot, if that makes sense.
But we did run this by that outside legal counsel, and they did say that there is probably a way to put language in the ballot question that says, hey, this is a continuation of the previous tax in a way that is legal within Colorado without actually saying that.
So we're working on that, but just so you know. So if you are considering keeping revenues the same or increasing them, we just wanted to kind of let you know what an increase could get you right now. So we talked a little bit about it's not just the federal and state cuts, it's these emergent needs that have been around since probably before COVID, but really made themselves clear post-COVID with inflation. So food access, behavioral and physical health access, self-sufficiency programs, really addressing those emergent needs. Those are not being addressed right now with Healthy Community Fund at the current amount. Those often come in off-cycle requests or come from our general fund. So if you were to consider a revenue increase, that could be something that could be supported. You would also get the ability to support some of the gaps of federal and state changes. You would have to increase the fund quite a bit, like over $500,000, to be able to cover all those gaps. But the board does have some other funding over the next couple years to fill some of those gaps, so you can kind of blend and braid county funding. And then, just as a reminder, we just talked about this, but the BOCC would retain the ability to offer credits. So even if you increase the revenue and then we are lucky and we don't have a ton of needs one year, that money can go back to the community, which is always nice. So thinking a little bit, this is all Liz, numbers.
So this just shows what kind of different increases look like. It's unrelated to the fixed mill or the fixed amount because we would build this into whichever option we would go with. But if we did just no increase whatsoever, this kind of shows you what that cost per $1 million of assessed value is. And then down the line with a $250,000 increase, a $500,000 increase, and a $750,000 increase, just so you can kind of see the scale of what those increases do and what they do to people's property tax bills.
Could you go back to that for 1 second so I could have a question? Is that okay, Jeffrey? What is the mill levy for open space and trails?
3.1, I think. I can double check that.
No, it's okay. Just wanted to look at the priorities of the county. It's interesting.
And then this just shows, it kind of shows similar information, but just at a very breakdown of like, here is the increase that you would see based on if you had $1 million assessed value house. So, yes.
Yeah. So it is hard to break out every single option. So we've kind of said there's 3 options. One option would be to keep the current collections amount but change to a fixed mill levy. And so you would actually see revenue grow over time. You wouldn't see a huge increase in the next couple of years, but again, the county does have some funding that we could blend and braid over the next couple of years to address some of those federal and state gaps, but you would see long-term growth in the fund. You'd be able to meet some of those emergent needs and then also fill funding gaps in the future. And it could also reduce the pressure on the general fund in the long term. Another option would be to keep the current amount and keep the current structure, which is the fixed revenue. As you probably saw in the graphs, at times it means that the fund could dip into the negative if we keep up current funding amounts. So it allows us to keep current funding amounts most of the time. We can dig into it when we see the graphs, but it doesn't allow us to increase who we're serving or the needs that we're serving.
Sorry, and I just want to clarify,
Yeah.
we would not go negative in the
Sorry,
fund.
that's the wrong number term.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that if we see additional pressures, we would have to scale back what we were providing to the community. So I just want to be clear there.
Francie?
Current amount plus a mixed mill levy. what is the current amount, what is that? I don't quite get that.
So that's this 2026 base, which is the mill levy. It's
I mean,
4.2
it would
million.
increase the mill levy.
No, so if you take the current amount of revenue that we collect through a fixed
Because-
valuation,
yeah.
which is $4.2 million,
Yeah.
and you convert it to be a mill levy, it's basically a 0.7 mill.
Okay, I understand the numbers. The wording was a little, I still don't really get the wording, but it's okay, I understand the numbers. We can move on.
The current is basically saying you don't do an increase. You just keep the number. You maintain the mill levy as is.
Right,
So that's kind of what she's walking through in
yeah,
this scenario.
but it's not really an amount. That's why I'm confused. It's okay, it doesn't matter. Let's
Yeah.
move on.
And then your third option would be increasing the revenue collections, and then either with a fixed revenue or a fixed mill levy. And depending on which way you go with the structure of the fund, you get growth either way. You get a bit more growth with a fixed mill levy as opposed to a fixed valuation. I won't go into any more detail than that. I'm going to stop there.
This is easier.
Yeah, Liz's graphs show it way better.
So we kind of charted out in a 10-year period what would happen with a fixed mill versus a fixed amount, again, based on historical amounts that have, or increases that have happened over the last, since 2000. I keep wanting to say 2020, but it's going back to 2000. So we have a long history that we're looking at over time. And it shows what would happen, basically where we're at today, which is the same for all of these scenarios, and then what would happen in 2028, 2032, and 2036. So over a 10-year period, based on if we were to stay with a fixed amount levy or if we were to go to a fixed mill levy.
And that would be if we don't think about doing any credits.
And that would be if we do not think about doing
Just
any
keep it
credits.
as
Yeah,
is
so
if
if
we
we were
do
to
it.
just take a full mill every single year based on historical averages and everything like that, you are correct.
And Liz, can you clarify in this, did you include the 2023 increase or remove?
So I did not, for when I was doing the average increase to show the 10-year growth, I did take out the 2023 increase because it skews things, I think, unfairly compared to the rest of history.
So I think it's fair to say this is probably a more conservative approach. Taking that high year out, you can kind of still see what that
Yeah, right.
impact is.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit hard to see this, I know, but basically the blue lines, all of the blue lines are the fixed mill, and all of the green lines are the fixed amount. So you can see that the green lines are pretty slow and stable, whereas the blue lines, they go up a little bit quicker over time. And so that's where you can see by the time we get to the end, if you can go to the next slide, actually. At the end of that 10-year period, the mill advantage, or having a fixed mill versus the fixed amount, gets you, even if we have no increase, has an advantage of about 1.15 million over that time period. Again, based on conservative historical averages.
Oh, so not per year, for the whole time period?
That's for the whole time period.
Well, that's like pennies.
Helps your decision making.
Yes.
Is that your campaign slogan? It's like pennies.
Well, I mean, it's like 115,000 a year. Like, right? Difference?
Yeah, and so again, this is just for 10-year period. If we were to talk about the full 20-year, it would also continue to increase at a more, not exponential, but it would increase
Steeper.
more at a steeper line, yes. Sorry, I'm trying to use my non-finance words so that
Good luck.
people understand, because sometimes I go into the details a little too much.
That's
so.
when I get lost, is when you do that.
Patty,
I'm trying.
Isn't there some kind of rule, if you reduce your mill levy credit for X amount of time, you have to go back to the voters to bring it back up? Something to do with Tabor? Is it, you can just give so in 2036, if we went, well, somebody went, not us, but, well, maybe some of us, but not me. If we went said, for the next 10 years, we're not going to increase. We're going to give you back a credit. We're going to keep the mill levy the same, but credit you. Can you do it for that length of time, or does it have to be, there's some glitch, and I can't remember what it is.
There is something, sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head,
we
but
we need to think about that.
I will clarify that for the
Yeah.
next work session and bring that back.
Because then you don't want to get into that scenario that then you have to go back again and say, oops, now we need to bring it back up, but since we went too long, we have to go back to the voters again. Because I would like to be able to tell people if we do a 30-year extension with a fixed mill and we're reaping in all these big bucks and we don't really need that much because things have balanced out. Wishful thinking on my part.
So I'd love to bring Kelly Kell and Jordana in a little bit into this conversation. In January of this year, we sent a letter to our congressional representatives, and we described losses to CCAP, adult needs determination, old age pension, child welfare, core services, and adult protection. And we put a dollar amount of around $1.225 million in those losses. So I think part of this conversation I want to shift a little bit is how do we make up for losses at the state and federal level? And so in terms of this, the third bullet, scientifically or other than just gut, the increased amount of collections over that period of time, given the current federal and state machinations. So just would love your take, rather than the board to say, oh, 250 sounds great or 750 sounds great. Where are your businesses relative to state and federal machinations, relative to what we described in January through that letter to our congressman?
You can answer now.
Make sure you're red and on.
I'm gonna give this one to Kel because she's been in it with the families that we're working with, and so she has more of that.
You've got to get closer to the mic, Francie can't hear you.
I'm gonna pass that question to Kel because she's really been the one who's been seeing the impact with the families that we're working with, and so she can give a little bit more context, and then that could hopefully lead into what we're thinking with the dollar amount.
Thank you.
Some of our programs hit the most, the most downstream effects, and so I think it's a good place to understand what or how big the impact of all of that might be. When we lose money in the healthcare area or the childcare area, that impacts child welfare. At the same time, this fund is really important instead of just state allocations, because we try to, the more that we can push toward prevention, and I think there's probably a different word for it in the public health area, of supporting families naturally, like community supports, Aspen Family Connections. I'm not sure who that is for you, Jordana. The better off for everyone. We get less child welfare referrals when we can use this fund to support other organizations. And I'd say we're already seeing some pretty heavy impacts of just the economic stress that everyone's feeling right now. Families showing up as increased child welfare referrals and more serious cases, which is leading to more out-of-home placements for children and then significant budget impacts in our programs directly. So my vote is, if I got one, would be to try to fund this very well for a long time. Nobody, I can't even underscore how important these programs are to families that live here.
Patty?
So I know we're going to hear from people when we give what we believe is a valid argument about the cuts that have been coming from feds to the state, the trickle down. It's not going to last forever. We're going to have a change in the federal administration. Could be in 2 years, could be in 6 years, who knows? Then what? What are you guys going to be doing then if the feds step back up to the plate and start funding things that they've cut? Then what we could, I would imagine, I want legal clarification, if we got to that positive point in the next generation of politics in Washington, that we could say, we will do a cutback. We will cut back on a long-term basis. I think the public might have some consternation about, we understand the problem now, but our goal and our hope, we're going to maintain the word hope, is that the federal level will change direction and those programs will be properly funded in the future, and we won't need to backfill as much, then what are you going to do with all of our money? And,
Kara, and then Francie.
yeah, we could make, I'm not done yet, we could make the case that we could then bring it back to the board and do a permanent cut for longer, or for the continuation of a sunset of, say if we were at year 19 out of 20 or 20 out of 30. We could, right, we can do that.
Well, we can do the temporary credits.
But we could do it all long term if there's that glitch I was talking about. Okay, let's find out about that.
Go ahead, Francie. I'll follow up after commissioner comments.
Well, I was just going to say that the nonprofits aren't going to think they don't need more money. I know it's a percent of the overall Healthy Community Fund, but most of them don't get as much as they'd like. So there is that aspect of it. Even if our federal money came in at a higher rate and the state money for some of our services, there's always 74 nonprofits that apply or whatever.
Yeah, but I, for one, am not going to support funding for things that they don't really need. Just because we have the money, we're going to give it to you and find a way to spend it. I think if we're asking the taxpayers to help us, through these hard times, we should have some responsibility at the end of the day.
Kara, and then Ashley, please.
Sure. So I think really as you all are talking, and I think what you all need to be debating or thinking about is any kind of increase. We really are not talking about a backfill of state and federal funding, right? I don't think that's the message for the public. I don't think that's all what you are looking at. I think where you all are at is there an assumption that we want to keep the same level of service, if not an increased level of service, as economic pressures in the valley continue, and that investment up front is going to offset kind of any losses of federal funding? So kind of just as you think about what kind of increase or not increase you look at the fund I want to, kind of where Patty was going is that we're not talking about a backfilling of federal or state funding, but where Kelly's going, it's an investment in our community like we have been doing on providing enough resources in that preventative as the economic pressures increase. And so I think as you all think about where you want to go with an increase, I would frame it more that way than backfilling as any short-term changes.
I was going to say exactly what Kara was going to say, but I will reiterate the point that right now the Healthy Community Fund does not fill the gaps from state and federal cuts. Your general fund does that.
Well, that's what we're trying to get away from.
Yeah, and so but right now the Healthy Community Fund is oversubscribed with economic pressures that are not caused by the feds and states. The state, singular.
I think both, real quick, I think both come into play. There is some backfilling, but there also is more of a need because of general economics and just general needs of people trying to get through day to day.
Yeah, I think for Kara's point too, for the public, the Healthy Community Fund right now is serving the community need that's been around since prior to COVID, but especially right after COVID. And then when the county is asked to step up to the plate to fill federal and state gaps, that's coming from the general fund and off-cycle requests. If you are to increase, you increase a small amount, we can then better serve those needs that are ongoing as well as tackle a bit of the gaps. But again, when our estimates, you'd have to go up to that $500,000 increase or around there to be able to backfill all federal and state cuts.
Yeah, tough decisions. I totally agree with what was said about we want the most funding for the longest time. I think we all agree on that. But what we're not really also talking about is what will voters take, because that's their decision actually. And so Jeffrey's right. This is an opportune time to pounce on the moment where we're all aware that there are cuts, and that may be something that would resonate, but it's also considered to be extremely expensive right now for all sorts of things, and people are complaining, for whether it's just driving up Valley. I mean, we all know this. It's all over the news. Nothing is feeling affordable. So it's also the kind of thing I'm afraid if you ask too much, people are saying like, enough, I'm getting it everywhere I go, and this would be no. And I would hate to see this not go through because we all want the most funding for the longest time. But so struggling. We have our 3 bullet points. Which ones can we change to make it the best benefit that will also be the most acceptable? I don't think we know exactly how the voters are going to react to a ballot question asking for more. I can see it going both ways, but I'm having a hard time thinking about it. Maybe it would be good. I did talk to Kara about this yesterday to know what else might be coming in terms of asks, because that might, if last fall we had 10 asks on our ballot up here, and they all passed. Surprisingly, I thought. Do we have a lot of others that we know are coming that this would be competing with? Does anyone?
I don't know yet.
I can share what I do understand is, and not much in the Upper Valley region. What I do understand is Basalt might be looking at a sales tax. Roaring Fork Fire is looking at a couple of different items. I don't know the details. And Roaring Fork School District is also looking at potentially a property. So I think as you all are looking at this, I think understanding that probably some of those ballot questions are going to be more on the lower regions of Pitkin County, where maybe there's even more price sensitivity there.
Francie and then Greg.
I was going to say exactly what Ted said, and given my concerns, I mean, we have such generous voters when it comes to taxes in this county. They always say yes, but I don't really want to overtake advantage of that. My inclination would be a fixed mill with no increase. That's where I am right now. Sorry.
And 20 years.
And 20 years. Mm-hmm.
Craig?
I was kind of thinking, 2 out of 3, and I'm right there. I'm at 20 years, fixed mill. I'm amenable to a small increase, but I'm also flexible. With it, we could just say no actual physical increase. It's already been mentioned that it's possible that we can backfill it, or the difference from not taking the small increase. I'm looking at Liz. Were you the one who said if we don't put an increased amount of collections on, but we increase the mill levy or make a fixed mill levy and we drop this sunset, we're going to see revenues increase, and do we have enough resources to fill that gap in the meantime, in the few years that there's a difference?
Yeah, so I think actually, and so that is true, is that we would naturally, the amount of revenues available would increase, assuming that we don't do temporary credits in future years. But in the meantime, kind of in this crunch time that we are talking about, I think it's good for Ashley to talk through a little bit that other funding mechanism that we do have available, to just put that front and center again too, if you want. Or maybe Kara does, sorry.
Yeah, Kara can talk about that.
Yeah, I think as Liz looked at the chart, you would not potentially see much growth in using the fixed mill for the couple of years, but that couple of years also coincides with what you all have set aside in the stabilization fund, which is the $500,000, 26, 27, 28 for the next 3 years. So you do have a limited amount. Again, that fund has been set aside for broader than just human service needs, so I would call that out. But you do have some amount of funds set aside in the short term.
Is there any way you could draw that line on this chart so I understand what it looks like? Where would the line begin in 2028 if we've got the backfill funds?
It basically, sorry, Greg, it would start in 2026 and essentially end in 2028.
And what would it look like?
It wouldn't show up on that chart because it's $500,000 a year.
Out of the general fund.
Out of the general fund.
I'm just trying to figure out how we can graphically represent what we're talking about doing, because I think that solution works for me, in that we would not be increasing the amount, which helps assuage the concerns that I've heard from Ted and Francie. Yet we get the fixed mill and we have the sunset in 20 years. So it seems to me that would that would work. I was just trying to figure out what it looks like so people could compare it. There ought to be a way to compare this on a
Greg.
timeline.
What's on there right now might help you. So in the blue, where it says no increase,
Right.
you can see that we would collect 4.2 million in 2026 regardless.
Right.
And then in a no increase fixed mill, we'd be at, we estimate 4.7 million in 2028. So that's
Okay.
not a huge increase in those 3 years. And so, but then you see the increases grow over the next number of years. You know, you're up to 5.7 by 2032. So what we were saying is in that small growth period, 2026 to 2028, you do have,
We have the ability
you
to.
have 1.5 million over those 3 years.
Right.
However, not all of it is for the same things as Healthy Community Fund. It's for a broader spectrum. So you can't say that you'll have 1.5 to fill in that gap, but you do have a little bit extra during that slower growth period.
Copy that. Okay, so the question is, would that work for everyone?
I just have one more additional comment. I was looking at the $128 increase for $1 million. That's assessment, not evaluation, right? That's $1 million of assessed value. But, I mean, like my taxes in this last round went up quite a bit, and I know yours really did. And a lot of people were feeling that. So if our ballot language sort of has to show the impact, I would rather it show the least impact, or in order for people to vote for it, just because of the recent high increases in evaluations, which translated to higher assessed value, which resulted in higher taxes. So, I mean, it had an impact on me, and I think it had an impact on a lot of people, and me actually at a lower level, because of what happened with our evaluation compared to like Brush Creek. But still, we feel it, and so if we have to show that on the ballot, that will hurt us, I think, if we have to show a higher increase per $1 million of value. We don't have any control really over how our properties are evaluated. So everybody's went up, unasked for, and we have to pay the, and I think that's what I've heard the most complaints about is the increase in property taxes. That last reevaluation period, or whatever that period's called that we went through 2 years ago.
Patty?
But you still have to show the public what their hit's gonna be. You can't not.
No,
show
I
them.
know. That's why I'm saying if we don't do the increase,
Oh,
you see what I'm, then we
Yeah.
don't have to show the increase.
right. The extra 500,000 out of the general fund. You know how I feel about that. I think it's also concerning, and I keep thinking that what happens if property values crash and we have a fixed mill, and we don't have a fixed revenue?
Yeah, and that's definitely a valid concern. It has happened once historically, and so it is something that could happen. That being said, what also could happen is that we can build this fund over time to be able to basically have a fund balance that would be able to compensate for that as well. So, if we do have additional funds and maybe we don't need as much and we give a credit, we could also decide, in a year not to give a credit and to build up a little bit of reserve that then can kind of help with those.
If we
future-
might see the possibility of a trend coming for.
Yeah.
We
So
don't
there's-
know we never dreamed the property values would go to where they are, and we might never dream that they might crash and they'd be below what we need.
Right. And so, yeah, there definitely is, that is one of the downsides to the fixed mill. And so it is one of the things to consider. But I think if you build, or you kind of set, we can set expectations of what that fund balance reserve is. We can set that at the board level and say, because like we have that in the general fund of like we don't go below this fund balance, and so we could do a similar. In fact, I would probably recommend that if we go to a fixed mill, that we do something like that, where we kind of provide a safety net for ourselves in the future. Don't need to be huge, because we want to use the funds for what they're intended for, but we could create kind of a safety net for that fund in a case where we had a downturn like that.
The other thing real quick too is the fact that we might have these other questions coming forward with the Roaring Fork Fire, Roaring Fork School District, who seems to be on the ballot every year for an increase. I think that's where people really saw the big hit, was especially with the Roaring Fork School District. And now there's just been so many things. But one thing is that this fund doesn't have a district. It's a county-wide fund. It services not just the residents of Pickens County, but the employees within Pickens County. So that's a broader scope of the money's just not going to your own backyard. It's going to the entire county. And that's a real positive, I think.
Okay, so I'll try and clarify for where we're at. So what I've heard from the board so far is bringing back a 20-year sunset, double checking as it relates to the other pieces. I'm hearing interest of going to a fixed mill, pieces of it. Sounds like there still is some question on the table about a no increase or maybe a minimal increase. What I might recommend is, I think the other piece is, if you did do an increase, I think it's really important that you all consider, and for the public and the voting electorate, is what is that increase going to? So last time it was very clear that was to go for public health. Ashley hit on it. What I might recommend is we can come back and choose a couple of those items, whether it's behavioral health or food security, and say, if you all did an increase, that we focused on that, what does that get for the community and you all? And kind of hear how that resonates with all of you, and then how that might help with the success at the ballot too.
And there's nothing to stop us from coming back in 10 years. The sunset might be in 20, but we could come back if something dramatically changed in our calculations or in the world economic factors. We could come back in 10 years and say, we're finding that we need an extra amount because, this has happened or whatever. We can come back. We just can't extend without a vote over the 20 years, but we could come back for another vote within that 20-year time frame.
Yeah, and
if need be.
That is true. We were actually talking about how we transition from the current property tax to the future one right now, because we're going a year early on the ballot. And so
Right.
Do we end the other property tax, or do we just put this one in place to kind of naturally take over when the new one, or when this current one ends? And so the one thing that we did talk about with the attorney is that in a case like that, you would have to probably put two questions on the ballot, where you would ask to end the previous one and ask for a new one, kind of in a situation like what you're talking about.
But you could do that.
You could do that, yes. It would just take two questions.
2 questions.
Yeah.
We're good at 2 questions. too.
To be clear, that's not what staff is recommending
No.
for this particular one. We're recommending you let this run its course through the end of 2027.
You're recommending what?
That you let the current Healthy Community Fund run to the end of its sunset, so run till the end of 2027. And then if the voters approve the new one, it would go into effect January 1 of 2028. So that you're not asking a revoke and new question, which would be really confusing on the same ballot.
Yes.
So it wouldn't go on the ballot this year?
It will go on the ballot, but it wouldn't take effect until January 1, 2028.
We'd have to have 2 questions if we were going to end the current one and start the new
Right,
one.
I understand.
Yeah. This way we don't have to have 2 questions.
Closing comments? Closing comments from staff?
Do we have direction?
You have clear direction?
I think Kara just went through
She didn't do
2 of
the increase.
3.
No, so what I wanted to double check on, I think that it sounds like there's still some ambiguity of where you all are sitting on the increase. I'm hearing a little bit all over. As far as no increase or a moderate increase, what I am suggesting is that if you all want to entertain an increase, a moderate increase, I think that we come back, and when we come back in June, and say what that increase would be, and we can work with staff of whether it be behavioral health or food security, because I think that's what's going to be most important, of what is the increase getting for the community, and then we can share what that increase would do for those programming and how that impacts kind of the flexibility within the fund.
Well, without actually voting, I'm not in favor of an increase.
Well, I think we need to continue the discussion to see what that would mean before I make up my mind whether we need it or not.
What would mean? But what would be?
An increase, whether or not, I want to see, I want to have staff bring it back to us, see what the hit would be if we increase by 250,000 a year, or whatever. I'd like to see what that is before I make a decision.
I'm open to that. A sunset's not an increase, you know, if we're just switching from fixed amount to mill. I think I was just bringing up my point. I just want to make sure we're not asking for too much and put the success of the ballot initiative at risk. But I'm okay for an increase.
I'd like to see the options that you're thinking about for an increase, but I'd also encourage you not to limit it so much, because while those are very popular and important things you brought up, the things where the increase would go, the community has other priorities as well. And if you eliminate them, you're not helping. So I don't want to limit ourselves at this point, but I'm willing to have the conversation about what level of increase it would be, if any. And I think, you know, that's merits further conversation, but I think we've come a long way today.
Thanks
Staff
for the
closing.
time. Yeah, we
Likewise.
got definitely good direction from you all, not direction, but what we need to move forward. So we'll be back on June 23rd, and we'll have some draft ballot language with some blanks where you still need to fill in, and we'll have some scenarios to put in front of you and discuss some of the finer points of implementation that I know we didn't discuss today.
Just one question about you said where the cuts would be. There won't be cuts, there just won't be an increase, isn't that correct? It'll be the same if we don't do an increase, isn't that correct? We don't have to cut any programs if we don't do an increase. Am I wrong?
Well, we might have to, depending upon what the needs are and what people ask us for.
Or you mean in the private sector?
I'm gonna go
No, I mean,
Ashley and then Kara, please.
what applications come forward for Healthy Community Fund grants, we may find somebody like food security is really in need, and we may not be able to fund something else over here. That's a priority discussion, so it's not cutting the amount of dollars, it might be cutting programs we're able to serve to any extent.
But we won't know that in June anyway. We wouldn't know that until August.
I think that Greg was taking what Kara said about we'll bring you back some scenarios to show you what an increase could support, as meaning that the increase would only go to support, for example, behavioral health, but that would just be a scenario. So we've heard from the board loud and clear that you want to keep the current uses of the fund fairly similar, and we'll talk about that in more detail next time. But staff's intention is not to cut anybody out of the fund, but we just wanted to bring some scenarios on if you increased it, where could it go? So Greg, to your point, we'll bring a diverse kind of couple of scenarios so that it doesn't appear to the public as this increase is going to go towards just one thing, because a lot of people have a stake in the fund.
That's the
Is that
beauty of
okay?
it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Grassroots.
Well done.
Grassroots, we will see you at the top of the hour.
You took it to a whole new level. You took it to a whole new level. Don't give staff the ability to have a dog collar celebration.
Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, May the 19th. This is the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. We're joined by Katie Nelson, Brent Davidson. We're going to do the whole thing all over again. You just came over and readjusted it, but I didn't have it on. Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, May 19th. This is the work session of the Board of County Commissioners. We are joined by the U.S. Forest Service yet again. Thank you so much for being here. The conversation is the Snowmass Trailhead Parking Design Update. In the room, we have Gary Tannenbaum, Carly O'Connell, Jesse Young, Brent Davidson, and Katie Nelson from the U.S. Forest Service. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. I'm Gary Tenenbaum, the Director of Picken County Open Space and Trails. And we're here today with the Forest Service, but also with our planning staff to talk about an opportunity that we have with the purchase of Snowmass Falls Ranch about 2 years ago. We have the ability potentially to upgrade a trailhead that has been never designed properly from the get-go, is off a county road and Forest Service road that is, extremely narrow. And when we purchased the property back 2 years ago, this was contemplated in that purchase, was to potentially improve this trail. And the opportunity we have now is that with the county ownership, we can improve that trailhead and still work on the transfer of the property to the Forest Service in the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And so that's why we're moving, a little quicker than we might have, because we have this opportunity. And to be honest, this is one of those trailheads that we have identified for years as a major, major issue. Right now, currently, you'll see that people park there and there's, could be 60, 70 cars, and they're all parked along that road. The road is extremely narrow. There is no equestrian parking anywhere near where they used to be able to pull in and be able to unload at the trailhead. That is no longer the case. So the goal is really, what we're looking at is not expanding this parking area. It's going to be 70 spaces. However, it's taking the amount of use that happens through that area and putting it into a managed area with equestrian parking. And we will work on an enforcement plan to ensure that that road stays open. So it's actually a way to limit future use too, because this does access a wilderness area. So Carly and the forest will go through the plans, and today what we're looking for is just your initial reaction. We presented it to the Open Space and Trails Board last week or 2 weeks ago, and the Open Space and Trails Board unanimously approved the budget supplemental that comes along with this and this design to the BOCC. And so with that, I will give it over to Carly.
All right. So the first up here is our project vision. So I think Gary summed up the background here well, but we have been working since February specifically on the design and engineering, and our vision here is to deliver a sustainable and well-functioning and appropriately scaled wilderness access point that supports the existing use and some anticipated recreational use while aligning with those long-term Forest Service management objectives, knowing that while the Open Space and Trails owns the property today, there may be a change in that ownership in the future. But regardless of that ownership, the intent here is to create a trailhead that functions not only today, but for the next 50 years. So let's ground you all in this site. So up at the top, you see the outline of the Snowmass Falls Ranch property. And you can see how it connects to Snowmass Lake via the Maroon Snowmass Trail and then becomes part of the Four Pass Loop. There's the East Snowmass Trail that is accessed from the area. And then less popular, but still a trail in the area, is the West Snowmass Trail. So those are the three trails that are accessed from this trailhead today. And the shades on this map, the darker the purple, represents the higher conservation value. This is the Watershed Biodiversity Initiative mapping. So you can see right where the trailhead is, we're in a yellow area. So yellow indicates that it's ripe for restoration. The site itself, zooming in a little bit, looks like this. So the site is accessed from Snowmass Creek Road, and the area in red is approximately the couple acres that we're talking about in the scale of this 640 acre property.
50.
It's 50. So we'll talk a little bit about Snowmass Trailhead today before getting into the preferred alternative. And we wanted to start by sharing some of the data collected at this trailhead, as well as 14 sites around the watershed. So in 2023 and 2024, Open Space and Trails hired Utah State University's Recreation Ecology Lab to study 14 sites around the watershed to get an understanding of the visitor motivations and the experience and some of the issues they were experiencing at 14 trailheads. What the study dates at this location were July 8th, 11th, 20th, and 22nd, which I think are important to call out that this was during peak season. So these researchers stood here for 4 days in July, and what they did was intercept each visitor going through the trailhead, handed them a GPS unit, and then upon their return, the visitors would answer a series of questions. And at all sites, I don't know specifically each site, we had over a 90% participation rate. So basically everyone that passed the researchers participated in the study. And across the watershed, over 2,000 people participated in this survey. So we have really robust data that shows us the visitor experience at this location. So what we know here, and other sites that are like Snowmass Lake, which would be Avalanche Creek and Capitol Creek, is sort of on that spectrum of people seeking more of a primitive experience. People are motivated to go to these sites for that sense of risk and adventure, nature and tranquility. And then more so at Snowmass Lake than other sites is an element of socialization. We know from this survey that visitors infrequently report crowding or unsafe conditions or conflict. So if you look at the bottom of this graphic, you can see that most visitors strongly disagree that they experience conflict. And then the middle one in the green kind of goes the opposite way of the way the question was asked. Most people agree that other people did not affect the recreation experience. So this is telling us, with statistically valid evidence, that the volume of people visiting Snowmass Trailhead today are having a good time. The researchers also looked at traffics, so the trail use counters, and then they counted the number of vehicles. The caveat here, I want to make sure is known, is that the researchers did not count the length of the Upper Snowmass Creek Road. They only counted the existing parking lot today. So the capacity of that, if you were to ask one to dimension out the spaces, would be that the current footprint of what is called the trailhead today can fit about 24 vehicles. What the researchers noted is that essentially all day, almost all parking spaces were accounted plus some. So they saw an average of 27 vehicles in the lot. Again, not on the road, but in the lot. But they only saw about 7 people per hour. And so if we compare this to all the other sites looked at throughout the watershed, or our open space and trails properties that they looked at, Snowmass Lake Trailhead comes in the highest, number one, with average number of vehicles per hour at 26 vehicles per hour. But it doesn't even hit the top. I think it's number 14 in the number of people per hour. So all of this to say is that the parking lot is at capacity almost all of the time, but there's few people. And I think the reasons that we can assume for that is that this is a 18-mile round trip hike if you're going to Snowmass Lake and back, and if you're connecting to the 4-pass loop, it's who knows how long. So you have a large number of users that are coming here for a couple nights at a time. So those cars are parking and they're staying for a long time. Somewhere like Avalanche Creek, right, closer to Carbondale, less overnight use, but still a primitive site, is seeing 26 people per hour, but a lot fewer cars. So that's telling us that there's a lot more turnover. People are going for a couple hours and going back. This is important to remember as we think about right-sizing the parking lot.
U-Trail is
33.6 people per hour.
Over here.
I know where it is. I said, how do they fit? It's a pretty
In a
narrow,
line.
slippery
Single file.
slope trail.
Single file, yeah.
Yeah, all
So,
roped
yeah, and-
together to get up and all roped together to get
Yeah.
down.
Yep,
That's amazing.
it is, yeah.
I'm amazed at Avalanche Creek.
It was a surprising finding to us
Yes.
as well.
There's a lot of people that we were shocked to see it, but it's been found and it's really close to Carbondale. So
And the GPS tracking is equally as interesting on that one. People are just going to the footbridge and back. So there's not, or what was the footbridge? Is the footbridge back yet?
It is.
Okay.
What do you mean? They just go up to the campground, you mean?
No, from where the campground is. So from there to where the footbridge is that
Oh, the
crosses
footbridge.
Hell Roaring
Uh-huh. That's
Yeah.
where most of them are going,
Mhm.
and back.
and back.
That's where I mostly go.
Yeah. You're one of probably the 26 people per hour.
There we are.
All right. So I hope what we've shown you is that the experience is good. There's a high number of cars parking there, but not a lot of people coming there per hour. But this is what the parking lot looks like. So this is that space that's designed to hold, not designed, I would say sized. It was never designed to hold 24 cars. And you can see that easily in this photo, we're fitting upwards of 35 through 3 different lanes or parking lines. So you have on the far side, you have one lane, you have this rogue middle lane, and then to the side that's off to the right, you have a third row of parking.
oh, and that's when people actually do the right thing.
Whoa, look at that.
And these are additional photos. So this is again showing you that 3-row of parking scenario in a lot that is it's truly only safe to park 2 rows. And as I said, the researchers at Utah State, hindsight's 2020, I wish we would have had them counting the road as well, but we did not. You can start to see that as you leave the trailhead and go down the road, essentially on busy days, cars are parked anywhere where you can fit a second vehicle. So anywhere there's about 8 feet of space, you can see that in the tire tracks, there's another car parked. And so we're just showing you further down the road as you get away from the trailhead. There are some places that have some bigger bump outs, so it could be safe for folks to park there. But then you get a situation like this sometimes too, where you have cars parked on both sides. So here is to sum up the existing conditions. We look at this as not just the existing parking lot that's there, but the existing parking lot and then the roadside parking. So on busy days, this is the peak, or this is the condition on busy days in mostly July, August, and then sometimes into the leaf peeping season. It's a high number of vehicles that can be accommodated in this area. The equestrian parking is 2,500 feet from the trailhead, so up on the top side of the screen. So for a short portion, they have a footpath or an equestrian path that leads to the road. But from that point right here, I can't point to it, they have to walk along all of the parked cars and the vehicles going to and from. So essentially what you have is an area where, what we've heard from the equestrian community, very few private horse users use this area. There is some permitted commercial use. Some of the there's the Avalanche Creek Outfitters, and occasionally they will use this. They don't try to advertise this trail experience because from their perspective, it takes about 45 minutes to get their guests from the equestrian parking lot to the trailhead.
Wow.
And so if your client's paying for a 4-hour ride and 45 minutes of it is battling parking, it's not one they want to advertise.
And also, that's not official equestrian parking, because that's the equestrian parking, if you guys know the big turnout on Snowmass Creek Road, it's just where they're safest to park. So that's not official by any means. It's just what it's become because of how crowded that's become.
So from Open Space and Trails and the Forest Service perspective, what we have here is this parking problem. It's not an experiential problem, and it's not a crowding problem on the trails. We have an unsafe access road to get to the trailhead. We cannot accommodate users that we would really love to be able to see on these trails, i.e. the equestrian parking. So the next slides are going to shift from today to the next 50 years. So hopefully that background will give you enough to help inform why we're making the decisions that we have. So we started this effort by creating these design principles to guide the work ahead. We know that this site needs to reflect the Forest Service's family of facilities. It's going to be important that we prioritize resource protection and scenic integrity and right-sizing the infrastructure to the observed use, right? We're not trying to design for peak use, we're trying to design for typical use. And with that design for simplicity, clarity, orientation, operational efficiency and safety, making sure that Mountain Rescue can get in and out here safely, the sheriff's office, any of our rangers and admin staff. And then it's always important that we provide that high quality visitor experience. So the team worked together pretty extensively to create this program. Number one on here, I can't see it on my screen.
You guys never get this on your computer?
We've been getting it.
Is that yours?
I think it was ours.
That was yours?
Oh.
I got that
Yeah,
error
we
this
get
morning.
every
I already
summer.
said, remind me in 240 minutes.
But you're specific.
So I might get it too. All right. So crucial to making this work, I think from what you saw on those photos, is eliminating the roadside parking. So from the point that you would turn off Upper Snowmass Creek Road to a proposed trailhead, we would remove the ability to park except for at East Snowmass Creek Trailhead through signage, physical barriers, and enforcement. And that enforcement piece is critical. So Open Space and Trails is working to create an agreement with the Forest Service to enforce here with either our ranger staff or some additional support. But there would be ticketing, there would be enforcement here. And also we would work with Road and Bridge to make sure that you have sight lines so that vehicles can see two-way traffic coming and can pull off where needed. But like we said, it's not that this site has high two-way traffic volumes. People are parking here and staying here. Then we worked to create the overnight and day use visitor parking program. So the plan that you saw accounts for about 70 spaces. And this means that we are not designing for peak demand. What we're trying to do is right size this parking lot to ensure that typical day use and that adequate access is provided while protecting that wilderness solitude and avoiding that induced overuse. So to get to this number, the Forest Service has what's called a wilderness standard. And so there is a monitoring protocol to make sure that this area is meeting the wilderness standards. And so they also have 39 overnight permits that can be issued for this area. So we use this information to understand what's the maximum total of overnight vehicle needs that we would have, and that's about 59 vehicles. So if you account for that turnover, so someone is coming back from their hike and someone's returning, you may have those 2 cars at a time. And then the number 70 helps to account for that flexible allocation of day use. So you have the large program of overnight vehicles and then some flexible day use fit in there. What I want to make sure is understood is we're not separating and saying 59 spaces must be for overnight use and 11 for day use. We're just saying that there is the potential for there to be 59 vehicles there for overnight use. And so within that, we want to make sure there's flexibility to accommodate both. There's 3 ADA spaces that we would like to include. And then in talking with the equestrian community, 5 equestrian spaces was the right size for this location. And then in addition to those totals, we aim to provide 4 dual purpose admin and emergency vehicle parking spaces. The trailhead itself would, the program for that would include informational kiosks, so those maps, regulations, emergency contacts, so forth. The overnight permit box, the wag bags, so people can carry their human waste out. And then while they're at the trailhead, there would be the double vault toilet to help deter that waste from in the trailhead. In terms of the landscape, the program that we wanted to make sure that we took forward through design is a minimal clearing of existing of vegetation, so sizing the footprint to the smallest size possible while still fitting that program, retaining those old growth and high value trees, using boulders, grading, vegetation, what you saw in those photos, using every means we have to prevent visitors from parking on shoulders so that we don't have to default to enforcement if possible. And then vegetation used as screening to really make sure this feels like a wilderness site. And then we're working with Liza to select native plant species found only within a mile of the site, and preferably just right on site. And we'd like to use design strategies to capture and slow runoff, water those plants, and allow that infiltration. And then another important component of the program is more related to construction, but removing all those invasive species within the limits of disturbance. So with that program, those design principles, we looked at the site. Here it is today. So over on the right side, you see the existing parking lot. And you can see there's some steep slopes right around it. There's a culvert. There's trees upwards of 29 inches in diameter. And so there was no feasible way to look at that site and improve the existing trailhead. The black line that's in the middle, that's the property boundary. So right across that boundary, you have this wide open meadow. This is the Snowmass Falls Ranch. And so this is the area we targeted for the design of the program. So again, just grounding you in the site context a little bit closer. The dashed line is the area of the proposed improvements. So that, in total is about, it's a little over an acre. The gravel parking surface for the parking spaces is 1 acre in total.
The current parking lot, that's Forest Service land?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing we want to make sure that is also pointed out is there was a pretty robust public process to get to the preferred alternative. So we started with the technical and operational coordination with the Sheriff's Office, Road and Bridge, Mountain Rescue, Snowmass Creek Outfitters, Forest Service, and then we also workshopped this with open space and trails staff, community development staff, and then some folks from asset management. And then once we felt like we had a couple options that the operational group felt like would work, We reviewed it with some of the key stakeholders, so Town of Snowmass Village, Forest Conservancy, Wilderness Workshop, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the Roaring Fork Horse Council, the Roaring Fork Outdoor Coalition, and Aspen Skiing Company. I can say they have support. They do support the project, so we're not waiting their response. We just haven't had a chance to get a response from the caucus. And then in terms of public comment, like I said, there was over 2,000 respondents to that 2024 Utah State Visitor Experience Survey. And so that laid the groundwork for the visitor values of this site. And I think because this area draws so many folks that not only are local, but also visitors, and this is a portal to our national forest, this survey captures sort of what you can think of as like the American public, the visiting public that are coming to our public lands. There was also the public process through the Snowmass Falls Ranch purchase process. The Open Space and Trails Board meeting, there was some public comment there, and the board gave us a unanimous approval. And then there's 2 upcoming public comment points with the P&Z meeting on June 16th and then the June 24th budget supplemental, should we go to that second hearing.
Can I just, what is the P&Z meeting? Is it a location and extent?
Yeah, so we have submitted our location and extent application, and we are in the queue to be reviewed on June 16th. Here is our preferred alternative for the site. So this graphic, this rendering was included in your packet. Where you would be is right on that access drive aisle coming into the parking lot. So from this point, if you were an equestrian user, you would take the road to the right. And there would be your 5 equestrian spaces sized at 55 feet in length, 16 feet wide. There's 2 spaces or 2 hitching post areas, sized both to fit our public or private users, private equestrian users, but also larger commercial groups too, or our outfitter groups. And then, yeah.
What's the gate? Do they have to have some kind of pass to get in for equestrian?
No. So the thought here with the gate is that you saw the creative parking in those photos. How can we help our equestrian users out and try to limit public parking in this? So we would like to install a gate. It wouldn't be locked, but it would have a sign that would say equestrian users only past this point. That won't stop everybody, but hopefully it would stop some. And like we said, there would be some enforcement. It would make you think. You'd physically have to open it. And all of our equestrian users have said this is a preferable option because they're pretty used to opening and closing gates, due to the nature of this use. And so there would be a gate on this side and probably a gate on the other side, just as that point that would make the general public stop and think. Over to the left, if you were to go to the left, it would be signed general parking. You would find the general parking with the spaces for about 74, so 70 public spaces, and then 4 admin and emergency access vehicles. And to the best of our ability, we would be using vegetated screening, whether it's in those swales or along the edges, to soften the view of the parking lot. We would use some grading to grade separate the 2 lots, so you'd have a couple feet in between. And then the trailhead itself would be at the farthest back corner, so that building would be the double vault toilet. And then from there would be another gate. That one would be locked, and that one would prevent vehicular access down that road to where the Snowmass cabins are now. So that would become an admin access road only.
And wonder if we find people, general parking, are going around and coming back into equestrian.
2 gates.
Also,
what?
2 gates.
Oh, so there's a gate on the,
we have
see the other gate.
It wasn't shown, but it was.
Okay.
There would be a gate on this far side.
I know people are clever.
The other thing too, though, that we have done is tried to use design as much as we can to deter those types of movements. So we have this turning radius and this island we have pulled out as far as possible. So if a car really wanted to do what you're suggesting, they'd have to do like a 5-point turn to get into that drive aisle, which I'm not saying they won't, but we're trying to do everything to prevent parking on the side of roadways. So what you're seeing here is every drive aisle that we can, we've reduced to the smallest width possible. So between the parking lots, we have one-way traffic. To get into the site, we do accommodate two-way traffic. But, again, we would be using boulders, vegetation, grading, making sure that on the edge of the road it just drops off or it rises so that if you're parking there, it's uncomfortable.
Well, and to talk about the parking issue, this is not in a unique area. As people know, we have parking issues all over the county. And it's one of the things that that we're going to start, we're starting a discussion, I look at Kara and Ryan behind me, is because we got to think about it holistically throughout the county and to figure out how to manage parking in a way, because we have people parking all over our county roads between contractors and others and Prince Creek Road. I know all these things, we got to come up with a way to deal with it. So we have some time with this, because even if we build it this year, it's not open till next year. But we got to come back to you guys and to others and work on a parking plan throughout the county, because we need to start addressing this throughout the entire county. But this is one area where, we have really good partnerships. So for open space and trails, we could work on this just like we did with CDOT at North Star and others. But other areas we need to look at too.
Is this a good point to ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you get a count for the number of cars, including the road, just from your photographs or a sense that were up there? Because 70 seems like a lot, and I'm just wondering if there ever were 70 cars there.
So anecdotally, what conversations I've had with folks tells me is that they have counted 92 vehicles.
Oh, no kidding.
On peak days. I wrote down the number somewhere.
Bob Helms.
Bob Helms has counted over 100.
Yep.
What I can tell you from like the number side of things is that if you take the linear length of the road, and you assume it's 75% parked, you can fit 90 vehicles just in the length of the road. That doesn't include the site itself. So the capacity is there. And I don't want to get too hung up on the count, because there's counts ranging from 60 over 100. The point being is that physically there is a capacity for 90 vehicles to park on that road. And so what we strongly believe is that this alternative serves to consolidate parking to 74 spaces in this area and remove all of the parking along the road. And so thereby it prevents the possibility for continued peak use parking along this roadway, and gives us a better management tool to manage the number of people that enter the wilderness through this portal, so the Forest Service can manage to their wilderness standard. And they're here today to help affirm that this size it fits their wilderness standard.
And my other question is, so the trailers go all the way around the outside of the loop to leave?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that, in working with the equestrian community, that was preferable, so that they could eliminate any backup movements.
Great. Thanks.
Can you touch on what's left to park at East?
6 to 7 spaces. Is that correct?
Okay,
Yeah, and we just went out yesterday, yeah.
cool. So I can still camp right there, just kidding. And then bicycle parking?
We asked people how they arrived to this
Yeah.
site in that Utah State survey. 100% basically arrived by car.
Car?
One could bike. And if having a bike rack there is desirable, there's certainly space to add it.
And East Soperso, that's sufficient even for hunting season, 6 or 7?
With,
Or,
well,
sorry, East Snowmass. Sorry.
overflow to East Snowmass would happen here, right? I think that
So you'd park and then walk back.
it's less than 500 feet away. So at this time, I think it's impossible to differentiate who's parking for what trailhead. And so, we would accommodate 6 to 7 users that could park for the East Snowmass Trail, and that's probably sufficient for those low shoulder times, but
What about hunting season
yeah.
and some of the others where you do park overnight? And,
yeah.
yeah, Greg.
Thanks for this. I'm going to assume that this place is only going to become more popular. And so when I see the absolute, Christmas Sunday 100-car, demand and 75-car parking lot, it means we're going to be putting 25 cars out on the road again, I guess.
ticketed.
If I didn't get that wrong.
It's closed already. It's seasonal closure already for Christmas.
Well, it's not Christmas, but you get the idea. Easter
4th of
Sunday.
July.
No, not Easter.
July.
4th of July. Thank you. And so my question is, are we just anticipating any additional capacity will be taken up by parking along the road? So we're not eliminating parking on the road. We're just reducing it dramatically. That's the first question. The second one is, I'm waiting for the people who know that area well to be outraged that we're doing this to a meadow. We're putting a giant parking lot in a meadow, and as much as you've completely demonstrated to me that it's necessary and this is the place to do it, what's your response to that? Is this a critically important piece of land we're doing this on? Tell me about the property where this would go.
So let me answer that first part. So if you go back to that Watershed Biodiversity Initiative map, this is a yellow area. So this is an area flagged for restoration.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's an area where they used to come in, where they come into Snowmass Falls and they would park in that area initially and back up and turn around. It's one of the areas when I first went in with the Perrys to that area, and they're like, the parking area should be here. And I was like, okay, I guess it
And it
could
had
be.
been used as that already, so you've got a
It's not.
precedent.
It's not a meadow that is. It's not an irrigated meadow. It's not a meadow that they use for anything others. It's come back over time. It's not. Obviously we keep the weeds out, and they've kept the weeds out of it, but it's definitely an impacted area that is not a natural meadow.
Great. Well, I think the design is brilliant, and from looking at the photo, I'd say you're done already. Well done. Congratulations.
Well, and then your first question was the parking on the road.
Right.
So, what we want to make sure that is understood is this parking lot is 74 spaces, and it comes with that commitment to enforce parking on the road. So minus those 6 to 7 spaces at East Snowmass Trailhead, there would be ticketing and enforcement of tickets to effectively. Our goal is 0 parking on that roadway, because if people are parked on that roadway, all this work we've done to accommodate our equestrian users who are blocked from the site today is basically void, because as soon as you get a car parked there, getting an equestrian trailer, having an equestrian trailer navigate an 8-foot wide gravel road is very, very challenging.
I get the point. So you got my point, though, is what if we get 10 days of summer that we have 100 people demanding to get there who are going to go and park regardless? Is there any way we could expand that and have an occasional increase of capacity? Is that what the gravel service could be used for? Or
so the Open Space and Trails Board asked the same question, and the answer we gave there is we believe this is sized for the appropriate volume of users presently and what we know of in the future. That being said, the Forest Service monitors the trail use through this wilderness standard, and so they do these encounter counts to understand how many people are on these trails. If those standards show that there is capacity to accommodate more people here, then you could accommodate more parking spaces in the existing parking area, which is here. So I would say, you know, not something that we are interested in doing today, but it's an
Expandability.
impacted area that we would block off and prevent parking on today, but making sure that we have a future-proof design. If the capacity standards tell us we could accommodate more people, then we have that in our back pocket.
I didn't see where you were pointing, if you're using, were you pointing
It's
to it?
slow. Let me see if I can get
The
this.
cursor even there?
So
It says revegetated existing parking area.
yeah, this is the current parking lot.
Back it down
And
there.
so the way we've designed it, right, is the access road goes right through the middle of it on purpose. So if you did need 2 lanes of park or 2 rows
could
of
open it
parking,
up a
you
bit.
could. That being said, we don't want to do this now because with the use today, we believe this fits within the standard.
Okay,
But
I get it.
50 years from now, you know, this is
I
something
think
to think
it's
about.
really beautifully done, and if you can build it to what the visual shows, that it really looks smart and like it'll work very well. Thanks.
Ted for Carly.
Yeah, thank you. I love seeing this. No one's even mentioned having a toilet there finally after all these years. It seems so long overdue. I think that's the highlight, actually. I'd love to see another one at Capitol Creek and another one at Conundrum at some point. Well, that'll be a further conversation. I'm a little concerned with Greg's line of questioning too. Just we're not designing it for the peak day, but when we do get the peak day, sometimes peak days are filled with a lot of people coming from the Front Range, looking to go do their 14ers and stuff. And when they're set on their plans, they're set, and they're not going to be like, oh, look, it's busy, let's drive somewhere else. And on that note, when you make plans to go to Capitol Creek, Snowmass Creek for the day, there aren't a lot of other nearby options. If you get there and it's full and there's nowhere else to park, it eats up the whole day to say, let's go all the way back down the valley and go to another trailhead. You know, like, and you see people at trailheads just insistent on finding a place to park, and they have bigger and bigger trucks or something, and they drive up on where there's a lot of things, and I just think that's a concern. I'm not saying we need to identify how to solve that, but on that busy Friday night and Saturday and stuff, you know, maybe it won't happen because it's a lot of parking, but I do think it's good to have some relief valve somewhere.
You know, I think what we know from the Utah State University study, we asked how people get their information about this site. So the avenues that we haven't really explored much at this point is collaborations with where people get their information. So people are going to All Trails, they're getting online.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's work we can do to work with some of those information points to say parking fills up by X hour typically on peak summer days, and we can let them know that you will get a ticket if you are parking in an undesignated spot. Like, enforcement is out. We can work with hotels, we can work with different
Chamber.
groups, you know, and at least what we can tell you from North Star at the takeout is that it's rough for the first couple years.
Yeah.
People don't know the information, it's new, and what we have noticed there is 3rd year people are getting it. You know, we're not seeing the issues at the takeout that we were that first year. You're not seeing people trying to U-turn. We're seeing less congestion, and so, you know, I'm not necessarily saying like it's just a throw your hands up and wait and see, but I think what we would want to do is proactively get messaging out about peak times, about when the parking lot fills up, and start to work with those information points.
And I think that's great, and I guess it would be an adjustment, and people would adjust because they do that elsewhere. I think for Katie, you managed all the backcountry permits. Since you started that program at Snowmass Lake, when it seemed like it was just way overcrowded, and you started putting a cap on camping there, did you notice anything in the parking when that program started that like reduced parking because people started accepting the permit requirement? And I don't know if you put any time into kind of seeing if there was a correlation there.
Well, I guess, thanks. Am I good? I think what I'd offer there is
I would offer that the existing parking area really hasn't been adequate, including for a permit system capacity, which Carly spoke to. So I would say, I'm not trying to evade your question, Ted, but I think, yeah, I actually am kind of curious to see how this will work, because I think what we had before, even with a permit system, isn't necessarily adequate, and or what we saw is what Carly described, which is, you know, I would say creative parking in the existing and along the road. So I guess what I would offer as an answer is that I think this is more aligned with backcountry capacity in a consolidated footprint versus what we saw before, which is, you know, adequate parking perhaps in a less consolidated way. I think once the permit system was instituted, I think we've seen some improvements along there, but still, you know, I would say, yeah, overcapacity. So I don't know if that helps, but I think it's aligned. I think this capacity is aligned with, you know, the capacity of those permit systems, and has the opportunity to provide something a little more appropriate to match that.
I do have one more if I could.
Please.
Well, and the reality here too is, you know, the beauty of this area is, and what we've told the Open Space Board is, like, you know, because the first reaction people get, they're like, oh my God, that's so much parking. And then you start to think about it and you go, is it enough? So having the other area to potentially expand to, if needed in the future, is really going to address some of that. And we're going to be able to work with people, because we'll have rangers or others out there. You can go up to the divide lot. You can go, there are places you can go, and we can direct them there. And I think 2 years, it's going to take 2 summers to get people to be in the know, and then magically people start to understand it. In other areas like a Rocky Mountain, you learn about the reservation system, you learn about where you can park. So I'm pretty confident, because I have to admit, when I saw this, I was like 70, but then I started thinking about how many people park along that road. I'm like, oh, actually, maybe this won't be enough, but we also want to start to limit the amount of people that access these places and not just keep building and building and building. So let's go with this. I think it's going to be enough for the time being. We go with this, and it kind of moves that way.
Ted, can I add, if we didn't have our overnight backcountry permit system in place, I would not feel professionally comfortable recommending this, but we have a valve to manage the backcountry, and we don't have all the valves and they're not perfect, but I think knowing that we have that tool in place is different than if we didn't.
I agree.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Brent and Katie, final words?
I want to make sure.
Or
I'll see the estimate
Carly.
of probable cost too before we
1.4
close
million.
out this decision or this conversation.
4 million, you're back in June.
Pennies.
Well, we're back.
We're using the fees from the Maroon Bells to pay for the trailhead improvements.
Not answering that question. No, well, we've told the Open Space Board, because there's a huge contingency in here, because we haven't gone to bid yet, but we need to go to bid as quick as possible, is that we will be back before we spend the money. Once we get the bids, we'll be back to give you the final number and get a head nod or not to move forward with this, but we do need that budget supplemental.
With
and
local contractors, of course.
What?
With local contractors, of course.
Yes. I would think only a local would be able to deal with this. They have to know Snowmass Creek Road.
Greg.
Does this budget actually include a plan for that overflow, if anything needs to be done to that overflow area?
This budget does not, however, that area is already impacted. It's already a gravel surfaced area.
So there's not a lot that needs to be done. I'm just thinking, if we build it, they will come. If we advertise that we've got this great new thing at Snowmass Falls and we're doing a deal with the Forest Service, fingers crossed, they're going to come. People are going to say, wow, this is a new portal to our favorite place. And I have a sense that it's going to bump up our visitation numbers.
It'll be
so I just want to be
see.
ready for it.
It'll be interesting to see, because I think what I see is mostly the word is out already. I mean, it's not, people know about Snowmass Lake, and it's not something that's out there, but it'd be interesting to see.
Right. If
And
we
that's
get
why
this- yeah.
the Open Space Board had the same concern, but to us, I think we've been doing this long enough that I think this is pretty darn good for now. And if we need it, there is a valve. And
You've
we
already
could
got
see-
it. It's there, existing already, maybe it just
Right.
needs a little
It would not
buffing or
take a
something.
ton to make that at least some overflow.
Okay, great, wonderful. I like it.
Okay.
Francie.
Called me before, but I didn't
Francie.
go, so I'll go. Let me wait till they're done talking. Carly, this is great presentation. Thank you so much. You know, we got a bid on toilets at Brush Creek Park and Ride. That was in the millions. This is not. So let's think about that, whether we can do that at Brush Creek instead of whatever it was. $4 million.
These are pit toilets. I don't know if that's
I know. I'm just saying. But
Yeah, well-
anyway.
that's of interest at Brush Creek.
Yeah.
But these are your standard Forest Service pit toilets like you'd see at Avalanche Creek Trailhead.
Uh-huh. And I also wanted to say, Gary, I appreciate your comment about not overloading the backcountry by putting in too much parking. I really think that's important. And so maybe somehow in the reservation thing, somewhere online, we make some kind of comment that limited parking available or something like that, so that everybody doesn't drive up there and think, well, I'll find a place to park.
That for us, that's the goal, is to really, because we're using trailheads to kind of not just provide access, but to try to limit the amount of use that's going back
Yeah,
there.
that's great.
Thank you for your time.
Right?
Did you?
Any closing comments, Brent?
I guess just really quickly, this is a really well collaborated, really well thought out plan with a lot of research behind it. So, all the things we talked about or that Carly mentioned is super important, and helping to administer to standard is also very important. So there's not high impacts in such a beautiful, important landscape. And then just another mention of restrooms on site too. All those things are huge. And so just a lot of appreciation for all the work put into this and hopefully a project that gets to move forward. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for the thoughtful design. Appreciate it.
We appreciate our cooperation with the Forest Service immensely.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So
Future
now
agen-
we can get the land and water conservation funds for Snowmass Falls, right?
Working on it.
fu-
Working on it.
future agendas. I think we can skip May 19th, which is in our packet.
Yeah, I don't know how it got, we didn't get a cover. That was our cover for future agendas. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but another glitch.
Any questions? Future agendas, May 26th.
You have one thing.
Please.
And Ryan, thank you for updating me on the use of this room by P&Z. Apparently they're going to start their meetings coming up at 5. We still need to be out of here at 4:45 though, because they do a 15-minute setup time. And I think we have so much on our agendas. It'd be nice to get out early every day, but we have so much work we need to get done. So, especially when we have budget and things, if we could have P&Z maybe start at 5:15 so we can plan our meetings at 5. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. They may be fine, but I just think having an extra 15 minutes means we don't have to rush getting out of here on some days. But if the board's fine with that, I'll go along with it. But
I like having a deadline.
well, we would 5 o'clock rather than we never used to be out of here 15 minutes ahead of time.
We can check in with Suzanne and have them talk to P&Z about changing. I think some of the things we just have to figure what land use items have already been noticed, so that's why it might be a little bit out for changing those times, but we can.
Yeah, but I think Ryan just said it looks like it's going to be 5 o'clock start time for P&Z in the future. So if the board's okay with that, but we have to get out of here 15 minutes ahead of time. So it's not like we can go to 5, but.
Yep, for sure, they're starting at 5 going forward. No meeting this afternoon. So
Right.
but
So, but
then
if they start at
to
5, it's 4:45. We have to get out.
yes, so to extend it, I
have an
think to
early
Kara's
time.
point, just in case there is something already noticed,
Okay.
we might need to take that into consideration.
Thank you.
And May 27th, sorry.
26th. Can I do 26th? We haven't done that one. Lindsay is still on there as the presenter.
I saw that. Yeah, we'll get that changed.
Okay.
I saw that.
That's all.
Yeah. May 27th, we have an employee, his name is Ted O'Brien.
That was what I was gonna say.
And then, we called it last time, and then I'm assuming we'll say to the public again that the airport will be last. Do we have a land use item that evening? 27th of May.
We will double check, but I am unaware of any.
Okay, otherwise, for the public, it is number 7, and it will be last on the agenda, which would be the second reading of the airport.
It's going to be
And-
really fun.
Open space and trails, we're leaving where it is, even though you only have 3 board members.
Yeah, and before we go there, well, you can continue. I have a couple future agenda items.
Any-
Following up on some discussions earlier this morning, it does look like we might be able to get a meeting scheduled, potentially on Thursday. I wanted to check with the board following the jail tour, if the board had availability for a working lunch.
To meet with
For which topic?
To meet with, interview lobbyists.
Which
28th.
Thursday is that?
Sorry,
The
Thursday the
28th.
28th, following the jail tour.
Thursday the 28th?
Wanted to check with the board's availability for a working lunch.
You can do that.
12 to 2, we're calling it.
I'm still confirming, but we've had some back and forth, so I wanted to.
You know what? It's not noticed on our. Does anybody see it noticed on?
It's
here?
The jail is
The
at
jail
10.
tour is, so we would have to create a meeting.
So you
Oh, yeah,
think
here
you
it
guys
is. They always notice them on the week
at lunch,
before.
or what are you thinking?
Yeah, the jail tour right now is slated till 11:30, so I've put a question out if they could do like a working lunch, noon timeframe.
With consultants? I mean, with the
At noon?
lobbyist?
Ish.
Wonderful. I think you're seeing 4 or 5
That's
thumbs
great
up.
turnaround. I'm
This is
So
the
I don't know, we're
28th.
waiting for more, but that seemed to be a date that was honing in, so I wanted to take this opportunity to check.
I have a meeting from 12:30 to 1. No, I don't. That one moved. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
You got 5.
Okay, I will confirm once we hear back from them.
And that's going to be Zoom, or maybe they'll come? They don't know
Yeah,
yet?
it sounds like it's gonna have to be Zoom.
Excellent. Additions? Anything else? Kara?
That is the only future agenda.
Did you end up talking to Roger, get in touch on whether Roger will be able to present at any time soon from Mead and Hunt?
No, I think we still need to work on that, and we'll
Okay.
get some more information.
Were we thinking about maybe doing that jointly with the AAB? Because we have a
We have
huge
not
AAB
clar- we
meeting.
have not
Maybe
Guy
Decide.
said something about that, but
Yeah.
that's,
It could also be that we invite them,
Because
whether it be.
we do have
Zoom
time
or
set
not.
aside for a very long 2-hour AAB joint meeting, and if push comes to shove, we might be able to do that instead of a regular joint meeting. I don't know, just a thought. I'd like to address that issue sooner than later, but
We do have the joint meeting coming up with the AAB to do the page turn for the schematic design in June, which will take up a few hours, so.
the joint,
Anything else?
Can't bump
Future
that one.
agendas?
just trying to be creative with
I was
this
just
one.
looking. I don't think I do.
Um,
Yeah, but I do want to talk about the open space and trails.
Okay. The only other thing I would flag is that we do have a housing retreat scheduled for mini retreat.
Right. Are we gonna
For-
talk about things we have not talked about for 40 years? Thank you.
So I'm working with staff, so we'll bring back a kind of a high level agenda for
Is
you
it the
next
police
week.
station
When is it again?
June 5th.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
at the APD?
Yes.
At the APD,
Mm-hmm.
Aspen Police Department?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They have a conference
We're
room
never
on
going to
the,
have Down Valley meetings anymore?
This is the 9 a.m. rehousing.
Yeah, it's
retreat.
9 to noon. So we will have a draft agenda to share with you all next week to look and solicit any feedback. Those are my future agenda items.
Except for the open space and trails.
Yeah.
What,
Well, it's for June 2nd, and it's a joint meeting, and we're only going to have 3 commissioners.
but I thought you guys already asked Open Space and Trails.
But we discussed it, and I think you were expecting something to change or something, but it didn't.
The calendar for CCI is set in 2025.
I know, you told us that.
So my point is, why are we scheduling joint meetings when we know multiple commissioners and staff won't be
Well, the
here?
fact is, it's scheduled. Let's see if we can move it, or if everybody's fine with just having 3 of us, then there's just the 3 of us.
So I think, and Ryan might have more up to date, my understanding is, I think it's up to the board, but what is scheduled is fine to have 3. I think Rye has shared there's probably some things in exec, so I don't know if some of the board members that are at CCI at least have an interest in calling in for the exec meeting during that joint meeting with Open Space and Trails, but otherwise it's some, less
What is it
critical
about
items.
harvest, or do we know?
There's some other things that Rye can give you an update on.
Okay.
Anything further in future agendas? Open discussion. Kara.
I've got a few. I'm glad Ryan's here to pitch it. So maybe the first one we can hit on is apple trees. Do you want to take this one?
My crabapple trees?
Crabapple trees.
I'm
more
so
specifically.
excited.
That's what's in the office upstairs, those blue things?
No, they're actually out here in front of the courthouse.
Oh,
Those
cut
are
'em down.
crabapple trees,
Um,
not crab.
Down. Tell
We-
the bears to go home.
Well, we have 2 that are scraggly, and the city of Aspen has offered to replace those 2 trees. They would be with non-fruiting crabapple trees. They would also, in the future, offer to replace others, and perhaps they would go into some of those vacant spaces where there might have been trees in the future out in front of our building here. The one thing on those spaces is, of course, we're doing the upgrade to the protection out in front of this building. One of the ideas was to potentially put a bike rack in one of those spaces. So I'm coordinating with Kevin and Jeff Pendarvis on that. So, but that's into the future. More immediately, we just wanted to get a general support if you wanted us to proceed with installing the 2 non-fruiting trees and to replace the
Well, that's one way of
the old
putting it.
ones.
You could also put it destroying the grown trees that are already there.
Well, no, they're actually, I mean,
The 2
they've
trees,
been pretty, yeah.
They've been what?
they've been scrapped by the bears. They're barely blossoming at all this year. They are really in bad shape. And the city does Arbor Day, and they give away free, non-fruit bearing, beautiful crabapple trees. And so I asked Jeff to look into it to see if the city, with part of their Arbor Day collection of trees, they would be kind enough to give us 2 to replace the 2
But I
that,
thought they want non-fruit bearing.
these are non-fruit bearing that they're going to give us from Arbor Day. They do not give away fruit-bearing
Oh, I thought
crabapple
you
trees.
said crabapple. You said something else.
I said non-fruit bearing crabapple trees.
Oh, they just flower? They don't fruit?
They just
Don't fruit.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay, I understand now.
Yeah.
Well,
When you walk by out there,
And they're
you'll see
beautiful.
that
I have 2 of them in front of my house. They're absolutely gorgeous.
how big are they gonna be when they go?
about the same size as the
Well, they'll
mature
be
ones.
little.
I mean, when they're planted.
They're little to start, but they grow pretty fast.
But they're committing, I understand, to not giving us just the little twig ones that you'll often see for Arbor Day. They would be
They're nice
a little
trees.
bigger, yeah.
Yeah, they're not gonna be the size of my thumb.
No.
That's what I wanna know.
No, they won't be the size.
Two
of your
thumbs up.
Because I planted a lot of trees the size of my thumb, and they're big now, but it takes a long time.
Mhm.
Anything else? Open discussion.
Thank you.
I don't know,
Thank
did
you.
you
Add
get an
more, I
okay on
think.
that? Do you
we-
feel like you got an okay on that?
We got 2 thumbs from Patty, so, and one from Greg.
It's either that or the city wanted to rip them all
works.
out, guys. I'm trying to compromise with the city here rather than ripping them all out.
I don't love it, but, oh well.
What would you rather see there? Can I ask?
The whole thing about not having fruit trees because they attract bears makes me a little crazy, but It's okay. It doesn't matter what I think. Let's move on. In this case, it doesn't matter what I think. In other cases, it does.
When there are fruit trees in your
You have
yard.
to say that every time now, because we're not going to be sure.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Further open discussion.
Yes, so I think we've got Kelly Medina on. We wanted to give an update
Thank you,
and
Ryan.
a request
Thanks, Ryan.
for a letter of testimony. I know we thought the legislative session was over. And on behalf of Picken County to the Colorado Child Care Assistant Program, so CCAP. So a little bit of brief update and then timeline, and then I think Kelly's on here and can give more detail of what's happening right now. So CCAP is actually going through a rulemaking process right now. And that rulemaking process, there was a first hearing last week and there's a second hearing on May 28th. That rulemaking process actually is quite, I'll share it from my opinion, is quite concerning of where things are happening, and it's turning a lot of the authority of how CCAP is managed to Colorado Department of Early Childhood
Development.
Yes, versus what's set up in state statute. And so just to give a little bit of background, CCAP is a drawdown that we use for our child care program, and we typically run on an over allocation. That's been well known. It's been part of the way it's been managed. Some of these rulemaking changes actually are changing that process period, which would also greatly impact how we draw down on the CCAP funds. And so I'm going to let Kelly jump in and give a little bit more information, but just so you know, timing-wise, we want to bring it to the board's attention today to get your interest of pulling together a letter. If the board is interested, we would pull together a letter for a letter of testimony, basically that we could submit written testimony. We could bring that back to the board on Tuesday next week because it doesn't have to be submitted till the 28th. So we have about a week and a half, but wanted to give you guys an update of what's happening because I think this was outside the legislative session, not quite, at least from my opinion. My view was I wasn't tracking quite as much of what's happening, and so obviously that does have funding impacts and wanted to bring it to all of you. So if you all are all right, I'd like to hand it over to Kelly to explain in more detail.
Yeah, so basically what we're laid out is they're doing a rulemaking packet for CCAP. And the concerns that other counties have brought up is that the proposed fiscal oversight rules are lacking in clarity, transparency, and operational guardrails that conflict with existing statute that lays out what CDBC currently can operate under. And then it also changes our performance contracts, which brings the impact for our allocation. Our biggest concern is, as Kara shared, we have typically always done right by the community by overspending our allocation because we've seen an increase in enrollment of children into child care centers locally, which is it's a positive. With these rule changes, what will happen is the state CDEC could then change budgets for counties who might not be spending their allocation mid-year, which could then put additional implications of placing families on wait lists. And then if we do have families that we can provide access to, we then can't buy dollars back from other counties to support that. So it kind of creates this cycle of impunity for families and children. And another thing that we're concerned about is that if we do see a $20 million reduction in CCAP, we are already overspending for all the right reasons, then that would mean that we're, again, overspending a lesser amount. And then the other implication is the workforce locally. If we're not able to overspend if we're not able to buy back dollars from our partners in other counties, we aren't given enough time to inform our childcare providers of the budget implications, and they're already operating on fixed budget for that fiscal year, and so that impacts their budget in the long term as well. There's a lot of more ambiguity too about the clarity, and again, I'm only sharing what I can retain right now at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But I think it's really concerning that, you know, we're moving away from providing access to children for this very vital resource that's early child care. In my opinion, as a reactionary, to try to compensate for other deficits in the budget, that in the long term down the road isn't going to actually fix the issue, it's just going to exacerbate it further for families.
Patty?
Yeah, I think we should look at doing a letter, but due to what you said, Kelly, about maybe it's in conflict with state statute, we should probably have legal review it.
And I would just flag and highlight that there's changes to obviously the way the CCAP is happening, which is very concerning. I think from a broader piece, I think what Kelly is hitting on is there's state budget cuts, and it's very concerning to see that in a rulemaking process, it's starting to take away county autonomy and a kind of flexibility in the way that we manage our services, which I think continues to be a priority of this board, of that if we're the ones that are providing these services, that we need to maintain some of that flexibility, and putting all of that oversight and authority outside of kind of the county process. There's probably a flexible way to do it, but it's concerning to see it happening through this rulemaking process.
And I find it interesting when it's my understanding that as part of trying to balance the state budget, they didn't really take any cuts to K through 12 or higher education. But they're pulling back now. Looks like they're looking for dollars from early childhood education or child care, which is, to me, part of that same gamut of K through 12 and higher ed. So they want to preserve part of it, but they don't want to preserve all of it. So I think it really rallies us, I think, to submit a letter saying, hey, what are you doing here?
I think it's also to emphasize the workforce piece. Again, that's another concern of ours, is our early childhood centers. We do have right now, we're lucky enough that in Hickman we can work with Kids First as a backfill. But again, it's this ongoing thing of the CCAP is intended for the most vulnerable families and children in our community so that they can have access. And even if we do have other partners that can step in, it's just, again, we're just filling in gaps, and in the long term, it's just gonna continue to come up again. And just to give you some more context with some data points, right now we're expecting to buy back $100,000 for CCAP from Delta County because we've overspent our allocation, and they were able to support us in that way. And so again, we have, it's been great to have that autonomy and that flexibility to reach out to our other county partners and be able to do that, and this just limits our ability to, like I said, I think focusing on the workforce impact on the families is going to impact in their letter is going to be crucial, because it's not just taking money away from families, it's just taking it in general from community members that are trying to sustain their business too.
So I'm seeing some head nods just checking in that we will work on drafting a letter. I think, Patty, your point, we'll definitely check with legal and kind of get those concerns. And I think we've got some drafts from some other counties, but would also bring in some just general county concerns about where is state oversight versus, again, flexibility for counties and implementation of those programs.
Who's shouldering balancing the budget?
That's a great point. Okay, we will do that, and we'll have a draft for you all to look at on next Tuesday.
Because we have to submit by Thursday.
The hearing is on the 28th, and so I know Kelly's working with CHSDA of what it looks to provide that written testimony.
Excellent.
I mean, I'm hopeful that we can get it, if you are on board and approve moving forward with the letter, we can get it completed by next Tuesday, that we have it maybe by Wednesday or Thursday, just to give them time to put it in their packet for review.
Yeah, and give the attorney's office a heads up that they're going to need to look at it quickly. Thank you, Kelly.
Chair, I share with you a draft of what the BOCC letter could look like it's drafted so you guys can take a look and just change it.
Yeah, Kelly, we can chat and follow up on next steps from here. Thank you so much. And kudos to Kelly and team for jumping in on yet another piece so fast moving.
Any further open discussion? Kelly, thank you. Ted?
Aspen Daily News just said Independence Pass opens Thursday,
Oh, somebody was just asking
Thursday?
me.
Wow.
probably midday, usually.
Unless we get a horrendous snowstorm, which could happen.
And we'll go skiing.
Boy, the
At the
Cypress was
pass.
pretty
Pass.
white this morning. It peeked through the clouds at one point.
That's all.
Thank you. Any further open discussion?
Good.
We are adjourned.